get all the tech checks ready, which already is through. But just 5 minutes, and I request you all to be seated and not leave from here right now, so that we are set to begin with the event. Thank you so much. And also for those of our guests who are outside this hall right now, if you are able to hear me, request you all to get your coffees, to get your water, and please be seated so that we can start with the event in about 5 minutes from now. Thank you so much. I'm requesting you all once again to stay seated, and for all of our guests who are outside this hall right now, as soon as you come, we would be ready to begin with the show. So requesting you all so that we can just stick to the timelines that we've set for this event. And this will also be going live on Republic Media Network, just a piece of information for all of you. So let's get seated, please. And then as soon as we begin, this will cut live on television.
A news network powered by India's love. A news network fueled by a mission. A pledge to put nation first, people first, India first. A network that's unafraid in its pursuit. A network that is undeterred in its quest for accountability.
Mr. Malia, you try to besmirch everyone. You're a cheat, you're an unaware, you're a fugitive, and don't try and pretend, Mr. Malia, that you cannot hear me.
A network that won't back down from asking your questions.
Rahul ji, any response to those 5 MPs who choose not to be part of this?
Whatever I have to say, I said it. मैं आपको सबूत दिखाना चाहता हूँ. आप इधर आ जाइए. हम देख लिया. आप इधर आइए.
A network that expanded to serve Rashtra ke naam.
Namaskar, मैं हूँ Arnab Goswami.
A network that stormed into Bengal, promising that kotha hobe choke chok reke.
Republic Bangla, kotha hobe, chokhe chok reke.
A network that global newsmakers turn to. A network that knows no borders or bounds. And a network that brings together ideas for tomorrow. A network that shall not bow down. A network that is unstoppable. The Republic Media Network, India's most loved.
On the 6th of May 2017, a group of dreamers and creators embarked on a mission to become the one-stop brand solution for the nation. Aimed at making business scalable and sustainable, setting new benchmarks in TV and digital production, working in unique ways, setting ideas into motion, gauging brand needs, co-creating, co-constructing and exceeding expectations, ideating and executing campaigns for the most coveted brands. Producing documentaries and films that have impacted the society we live in. From themes to formats, we are experimenting every day, pushing our boundaries every time to create content that awakens passion and brings your brand story to the world. stories that engage and transform. We are geared to expand and explore new narratives and craft solutions for your brand needs. Agile and dynamic, we are the storytellers and the story doers of tomorrow. We are fluid. Ideate, accelerate, transform. And our quest has just begun.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the final call, if I can put it like that. We are set to begin the event in 2 minutes from now. So one last request to all of you who are probably outside the hall at this point to please come inside. So we are going to begin with the event in literally the next minute. All right, a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me enormous pleasure to bring you all the first of its kind conclave right here in Pune. The Republic Dialogues, a thought leadership series that is geared up to put the spotlight on the dynamics of the Indian economy, understanding both the macro and the microeconomic picture. And doing it all with some of India's brightest minds, today we'll hear presentations and conversations by thought leaders, top economists, and those who are at the very helm of India's policy making. With just 10 days to go for Budget 2023, it is crucial to look at not just where India stands presently, but also at all the strands of possibilities of the future. This thought leadership series will ensure various perspectives on the India story stage. India remains the fastest growing economy, and India is being looked upon as a global bright spot. Many project that India will become a $26 trillion economy by 2047. India's vision this budget season is not limited to a year or a decade, but we are transversing towards building policies for India at 2047. Let's give you a fair idea of it through this AV.
India, the fastest growing economy, the bright spot amid global uncertainties, a trajectory rooted in inclusivity and sustainability. India is assuming G20 presidency.
आज मैं ये आश्वासन देना चाहता हूं कि भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता इंक्लूसिव, एम्बिशियस, डिसिसिव और एक्शन ओरिएंटेड होगी। एक्सेलेंसी, अगले एक साल में हमारा प्रयत्न रहेगा कि G20 नए विचारों की परिकल्पना के लिए और सामूहिक एक्शन को गति देने के लिए एक ग्लोबल प्राइम मूवर की तरह काम करे।
India is gearing up for the last deliverable budget of the government. All eyes are on the India growth story. It's time to peek through the looking glass. It's time to analyze what the future of the Indian economy holds. It's time for the biggest pre-budget dialogue on the economy. Republic Media Network presents the Republic Dialogues, a thought leadership series.
time when a new world order has been set in motion, new economic partnerships are being forged. Global partnerships are being realigned. The Republic Media Network's much-awaited Thought Leadership series is a breakthrough platform to ideate on critical economic questions. And now, without much ado, I'd like to welcome on stage the Editor-in-Chief of Republic Media Network, Arnab Goswami, to welcome you all and set the tone of the day. A huge round of applause for Arnab.
Thank you, Suesha. And good morning, everyone, and good morning to everyone in Pune. It's a complete and absolute privilege and pleasure to be back in my city. And I wanted to begin by saying that I have an old and fond and very personal equation with Pune. I know every street of this city. I spent 3 years in this city in class 5, 6, and 7 as a student of St. Vincent's, which I'm still very, very proud of. Wonderful school. My father was posted in the army, and he was the commander of an engineering, commander work engineers in Kadki. And we lived in Kadki. I used to go to the College of Military Engineering with my father. My sister is presently posted in Pune. But most importantly, I have with me in the audience someone I consider a brother and one of the most prominent citizens of Pune, Mr. Ravi-Navani, who is with me here today. This event, the fact that we should do it in Pune, is truly Rajan's idea, and I would like to thank him for it. Rajan is one of those people who put faith in Republic when we started. He doesn't talk about it, he's very low profile. But not only did he support us, it was in his premises, in a small co-sharing garage when I didn't have an office, that I was given space. So Republic started in Bombay, but it's one of its first and greatest supporters. Mr. Navani is from Pune, so I just wanted to start by saying I have many connections to Pune, and I'm very proud to be hosting this event in Pune. So firstly, thank you very much to everyone in Pune for coming this morning. And thank you, Rajan, for everything you've done for me. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republic Dialogues, a thought leadership series. Before I speak about it, a couple of words about Republic as a network. In 5 to 6 years, we have built an independent, and that's the most important thing in the media today, an independent media network. Independent and defiantly independent in its ownership. Independent in its editorial thinking, you may like or not like. I know many people agree or disagree, but the one thing they will always say about Republic is whether you agree or disagree with them, this is their opinion. And we are not shy of our opinion. We back our opinion with factual reporting and research. We have fantastic journalists, some of whom are here in this hall today. I wanted to tell you that Republic has expanded into English, into Hindi. We have a firebrand and very popular network in Bengal. We are going to expand in every language in the country. And I'd like to share from this platform that we are going to transform the digital news landscape of the country this year with the largest digital newsroom. And we are all doing it through very enterprising journalists and a very entrepreneurial sense of this whole organization. And today we are one of the largest employers in the Indian media space, and I think that we are well poised for growth in the future. I want all of you to make Republic your brand of choice in the future. And now a few words about the Republic Dialogues. Why the Republic Dialogues? I feel a crying need, and I look into the screen every night, and I look at the camera, and I imagine talking to one person, and I know that is multiplied many times. But at the end of the day, whether it's a public campaign we are doing, whether it's a debate, I feel I'm speaking to people. And I cannot look at the camera as an inanimate object. I look at the camera as a person. And I think there is no greater thrill than a conversation face to face. We've gone through the COVID times. I know life is about convenience and the convenience of a Zoom call. But there is something very impersonal about it. And I get motivated when I meet people in the flesh. And the Republic Dialogues is simply that. One, to move our conversations outside Mumbai and Delhi. We have large conclaves in Delhi. Some of the largest conclaves in Delhi are hosted by the Republic Network. But India is growing beyond Delhi and Bombay. Beyond Delhi and Bombay and Bangalore and Kolkata, the traditional metros, there is a world out there of entrepreneurship. It gives me such immense pride when I go to an Ahmedabad, a Pune, a Thiruvananthapuram, and now Guwahati, my city, and see the transformation in the landscape there. You ask yourself, there must be something that is driving this all. And that is, in my view, a change of inertia. Inertia has changed. Somewhere the people of this country are defiantly saying, from where we are, true to our cultural ethos, speaking the language we were born with, we shall contribute to the growth story of this country. Without this, it is impossible that we would have had the confidence to say that we would have sustained 6, 7, 8% economic growth and even had the economists acknowledge our future growth without these people pioneering the efforts. And therefore, we wanted to start the Republic Dialogues as a conclave deliberately placed outside the traditional metros. And I can see the enthusiasm. As I met some of you today just before this, I could see the excitement. I could see the absence of cynicism. I could see the same energy and hope with which I started the Republic Media Network 6 years back, with the blood rushing through my veins, wanting to make a space for myself. And therefore we said, why not? And Rajan said, why don't you do it in Pune? And Rajan, I'd say, take it forward. Why not do it all over the country? So this conversation has tremendous excitement. I know that it matters. And it matters when someone like Dr. Shamika Ravi comes here today with her experience and background and wisdom, and she speaks to you and she takes questions. It makes a whole world of difference, because the audience will go back with a very deep and clear sense of where they think the economy is headed. And I think I thank you for that, Dr. Ravi, for coming today. I'm excited about the economy panel we have today, and I'm tremendously excited as well, and I'm sure all of us are, that we have later today none other than Dr. S. Gurumurthy, who's flying down from Chennai. And I just told our teams, has Mr. Gurumurthy's flight taken off? The biggest breaking news today will be Mr. Gurumurthy's flight takes off and Mr. Gurumurthy lands in Pune. Because just to soak in his wisdom, incredible man, such depth of understanding and the ability to relate economy, geostrategy, finance, and politics. And whatever we are as a country is a conjunction of all these four. So I actually, if you were to tell me, even if we were not hosting the event, but someone were to say, we have Shamika Ravi, we have Gurumurthy, all at this event, I would certainly come and attend the event. And even today, I would say, if there are people who just for the intellectual flavor would want to attend the event, please call them in. Let the hall fill up. We'll all stand if necessary. But this is the reason we started the Republic Dialogues. Why are we having the first dialogue on the economy? Frankly, the dialogues can happen on any subject. It's because I feel the moment of turn is coming. The moment of turn is coming, and it's going to happen sooner than we think. We may not have to wait for 2030. We may not have to wait for 2035. And just yesterday, Martin Wolf, the chief economics commentator of the Financial Times, said this, and I have the quote before me. He said, I think a very important point, this is Martin Wolf, he said, that I think a very important point is that over the next 10 to 20 years, it is overwhelmingly certain to all of us, and he's talking about the whole world, it is overwhelmingly certain that India will be the fastest growing of all the big economies, and it is going to be very big. Now, the British are known to be very conservative with their language. If you take the exception of someone like Boris Johnson, they're usually very understated people. But the bottom line is this, is somewhere with all that happens in our political fabric, it influences our thinking. And it makes us cynical of our own possibilities. Ernst & Young is projecting India to become a 26 trillion economy by 2047, with a 6-fold increase in per capita income. Translate that to where it will be. And I just feel the thrill back. I say it's going to happen in my lifetime if I live till that long. I'm a doddering old man, but I will see it. I shall see it. And I certainly, when I see it, I'll stop becoming doddering. And it gives me a reason to hope. And it makes me excited. So this thought leadership series today is taking place at a very critical juncture. We are all set to roll out the last full budget of the current government. But I think I would not relate today's conversations entirely to the budget alone, because I think it'll be a very short-sighted view. And I think frankly, if you ask me, and I'm sure the knowledgeable people here will agree with me, that we overemphasize on the budget. It's that British tradition. We expect everything to be taken in the budget, and then, it's the usual, and if you've seen, the government decides a lot outside the budget. But you look at the factors before us. Is the last full budget of the current government, point one. Point two, we have taken over the G20 presidency. So diplomatically, geopolitically, and economically, we are very hard to ignore. We're very, very hard to ignore. And if you look at the trend in the macro picture, just look at the fact, 6-7% growth, and you look at 0.5% growth for the United States. They are saying 4% for China. Frankly, I think China will be battling against itself if China is at 2 or 3%. And we are growing at 6.6 to 7%. World Bank is putting a conservative number of 6.6%. We have record FDIs, but forget the FDIs. You just see I hate to make the reference to the stock market, but you ask what Morgan Stanley is talking today, they are saying there's going to be a 7 trillion boom in the stock market. You see the remittance flows that are coming into the country. Every indicator is telling you a story. And that's what I want to really hear today from every indicator is telling you a story that the hockey stick moment is coming. So we now need to reinvigorate the audiences in marvelous cities like Pune into belief and aspiration. What more can we do? And all of us, I think, must set ourselves higher benchmarks. I just met a wonderful young man who from Suhana Masalas before me, and immediately in the 1 minute of the conversation, I told him, Mr. Chodia, when the FTA is signed with the UK, I'd like to see your company set up shop in the United Kingdom so that we can give a real taste of the original Indian masalas, right, to the British. The British don't need to have a patent for Indian masalas, right? So I said that we can go global. Our flavors are changing, and we should think global. I would like to lastly say one thing. I think every Indian company owes it to have a global presence. The moment of equalizer is coming. For me, the equalizer in media is digital. The digitization, the availability of bandwidth, both in terms of production and consumption. So I'm looking at the possibilities of creating content globally. If all of us, even suppose 10% of India's profit-making companies expand globally, imagine the footprint. And not with a view of, we'll reverse colonize the world. No, not with a view to putting someone down. With a view to asserting ourselves and marking our space in the world. And I think this is a great day. It's one of the wonderful days when I will get to listen, and I should stop talking at this stage, because I can assure you, if you don't stop me, and if she's going to be so nice to me, I'll talk for the next 2 hours. I'll anchor from here tonight, maybe tonight. But thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure, privilege. I look forward to listening to all of you, and a warm welcome to the Republic Dialogues, which is our thought leadership initiative. And thank you to all our panelists for coming today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arnab. And well, as we await the rollout of Budget 2023, the last deliverable budget of the current government of India will be looked at very, very closely. It is crucial to build frameworks that strengthen the national economy and ensure the impact is global, like Arnab also mentioned. The economic agenda is to create a roadmap for sustainable growth and macroeconomic stability. The first session this morning will put focus on what it will take to accelerate India's economy. How can India seize the opportunities of tomorrow? And what are the structural reforms that will propel growth? Our first guests will discuss structural reforms 2014 to 2022 and what lies ahead. Before that, we play out the saving.
The key drivers of a strong economy lie in the policy decisions. Be it the digital revolution or the rollout of the world's biggest banking for all scheme, or the supreme success of Startup India. The road from vision to implementation is built on strong structural reform. It's time to put the spotlight on structural reforms 2014 to 2022. What lies ahead?
And well, we are delighted to welcome on stage Professor Shamika Ravi. Professor Ravi is the Vice President, Economic Policy at the premier think tank ORF. She was previously a member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India. Professor Ravi is a non-resident senior fellow of the Governance Studies program at the Brookings Institution, Washington, D.C., and holds a PhD in economics from NYU. She has been a part of key working groups of the SEBI, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and various top institutions in India and beyond. Her research work on India's growth and development has been featured and frequently cited by leading global media outlets. Today, it is a privilege to have Professor Shamika Ravi hold this very first session at the Republic Dialogues, the Thought Leadership Series, on Structural Reforms 2014 to 2022, What Lies Ahead. Professor Shamika Ravi, can we have you on stage? A huge round of applause.
Namaskar. Good morning, everyone. What a privilege. What a privilege. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me also say something which might be a bit controversial, but for a 47-year-old woman, it's very nice to be in a room where the median age looks like it's closer to 50, not 75. India is a young country. Of course, we're an old civilization, but we're a young country, and we are getting impatient. 47 is also almost 20 years more than the median age of the country. So the country is a lot younger than we are, and thinking in ways which are absolutely disruptive and innovative. Their ambition levels are very high. So some of the words are not mentioned: hope and optimism, ambition. This is a young country. This is a hungry country. This is a country looking for rapid growth. What I am going to talk about today is the real economy, because we talk a great deal about the financial sector, which is what often when we think of the budget, we start looking at the Sensex, we start looking at some obvious indicators, but the real economy is so much more than just the financial sector. Let me start off by showing you the first slide, if this will work. Do you want me to point this somewhere? Yeah. So this is my first slide. I don't have any text. I'm just going to show you evidence. This is India's per capita income, GDP. And of course, we are quite familiar with this. The fact that we are the fastest growing major economy, the fact that this is the per capita, by the way. So it is not just the aggregate. Per capita is an ordinary Indian's income level. That's the way you should look at it. It's been rising very rapidly. But you know, 47 years ago, an average Indian, an average Chinese, and an average South Korean were identical. Just 47 years ago. So around the time when I was born, we were similar, and just look at the difference today. So I want you to be sensitive to what is the growth potential and what is, oops. You can just take the top off. Okay, let's just go back to this. You know, growth is not an abstract concept. Growth is a lived reality. And all it took was a generation for a country like China, for a country like South Korea, one which is 10 times richer than us, and the other which is around 4.5 times richer than us. So economic growth, I want you to also, when you talk of ambition, yes, we have to be ambitious. We have a long way to go. Our growth potential, we are growing very fast, but our growth potential is enormous. Now, many people pick issues with economists that we are too obsessed with economic growth and GDP. This is the human development indicators. So it's not just that economically we are growing, and growing rather rapidly, but if you look at the human development indicator, which means it's a combination of outcomes for health, education, gender, etc., we are roughly 10 years behind China. So while economically we might be close to now 20 to 25 years behind China, developmentally we are a lot closer. Right? And one of the reasons that you have to appreciate is that we are a democracy. And the media is a very large part of this. In a democracy, people demand services, demand development, and it gets done. It might be with a delay, it might not be even everywhere, but the fact that despite an economic growth which is behind China by almost 25 years, developmentally, we are only 10 years behind. Right? They are too specialized. There are few sectors that determine their fate. So India is definitely one of the brightest sparks, even today, despite the pandemic. We are well on our way to achieving our developmental goals. You often hear, and I think media is a large part of the blame, India is getting intolerant and things are really falling off the cliff and so on. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the number of riots in India annually. Now, why do I pick something like riots to show to you? Because riot, definitionally, is a very precise thing. A riot involves, basically it is a violent episode which involves 5 people or more for a common purpose, and it is registered at the police station. What are you seeing? There is a structural breakdown. India used to be far more violent, if that's the word you want to use for riots, on the streets. Since 1990s, you're seeing a structural breakdown. There is a remarkable decline in the number of riots. So yes, today we are all on our telephones and our mobile phone, and every episode gets therefore magnified. But if you see the data objectively, we have far fewer conflicts in our streets today than we have had historically. Don't forget that. And I think it's important to keep an objective point of view. These are the number of rapes. Again, rape, why do I pick up some of these statistics? Because the definitions are precise. So you can do longitudinal or time-wise trends to see what is happening to India. So in crime against women, just these are our different states. The top one is India. What do you see? There is a structural breakdown. The number of episodes of rapes have begun to come down, and significantly so. In almost all the states, barring Jharkhand, Haryana, but everywhere else, there is a remarkable decline, and you must appreciate what this means on the ground. These are very, very big changes happening. This is infant mortality rate. Why do I map infant mortality rate? Well, it is one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Children below the age of 1 that die per 1,000. And on the x-axis, you have growth, economic growth. So as the GDP per capita has been growing, look what is happening to infant mortality across all our states. Not just the southern states, also the most backward parts of the country, the biggest states, the poorest states. Infant mortality in India is crashing on account of significant economic growth. Because it's not just availability of healthcare, yes, that's a very important factor, but when children get better water, cleaner, access to air, just cleaner food, more nutrition, they survive. So economic development, in real terms, are these things. What has been happening to food security? Just look at it. We are growing, that is around 112%. We are growing more than what we are consuming in our consumption basket as far as food is concerned. Our food imports are down to now less than 4%. So India is self-sufficient food-wise. It's an important thing to keep reiterating and educating people on because we've lived through famines. A lot of our policies, and sometimes I think even people in policy-making positions, we still carry that shadow. We still carry the memory of those very difficult times. So our policy can also be sometimes lethargic. Right now, we have a problem of abundance, which means we need to work much more on distribution than mere more production. So distribution is an equally challenging and complex exercise, and that is where most of our effort has to go in. Of course, we have to diversify, but we are growing much more than we need, which is a great thing. Why is the current Russia-Ukraine crisis such a major factor, and why are we constantly talking about it? Because while food security is under our belt, in terms of defense, you are seeing India for the first time is actually exporting missiles, etc. Energy is an area where we continue to be extremely dependent on imports. Amongst the major economies, that's India, China, and the US, the percentage of our total energy consumed which is imported, ours is one of the highest, 34%. Now what you're seeing, the Americans have very systematically brought it down since 2005. They used to be very high too. They were close to 30%. You see what the Chinese, they're stabilizing around 15%. For us, it's still going up, which means, of course, we are a young, hungry country. We need to grow. For that, we need energy, and we are importing a lot of energy. But moving forward, this is basically to tell you why we need such a mass movement towards renewable. We need a green revolution equivalent in the energy space. Remember when green revolution happened and the farmers adopted high-yield variety and how production rose within 2 decades, almost everywhere in the country. We are standing at that cusp of energy revolution. So renewable for us is strategically of a long-term interest, and we have to do it. I want to talk a little bit about labor market, because we are a young country and you keep hearing about demographic dividends, which could turn into a disaster, is something we are constantly warned. But I want to sensitize you to certain peculiarities, which is basically, these are idiosyncratic to India. It's not very common globally. But first, we have to distinguish between something called labor force. Now, there is again something called youth inactivity, which is euphemism for youth unemployment. There's something very peculiar happening to the youth globally. The youth today are far more inactive, meaning economically they're not working, than historically ever. And that is true for India as well. What you see here is the unemployment rate of people above the age of 30, those are the gray bars, and look at the unemployment rate of people below the age of 30, 18 to 30. There's a huge difference. There's a 6-fold difference. But now here is a peculiarity where we are not like the rest of the world. We have something called graduate unemployment. So we are a little bit similar to the Chinese like that. These are only youth, so we're not talking about older people. Look at the unemployment rate of people who have graduate degree and above amongst the youth. So these are all 18 to 30-year-olds who all have at least a graduate degree. These are the red bars. Look at their unemployment. Compare that to the unemployment of the youth who are almost uneducated, primary and below. They're working. The unemployment rate for the uneducated youth is very low, while the unemployment rate for the highly educated in the country is almost 6 times as much. That is a bizarre situation, right? Historically, we were taught that you study hard, and the more you study, you're likely to get better jobs. But that is not true anymore. The more educated you are, the more likely you are to sit at home today. And that is a problem. What we have to get the youth to also do is take up risks. Now you appreciate why Startup India and the whole atmosphere and the climate around startups is so important. The mindset has already changed, but we need to change it beyond, amongst the older lot as well. You know, the cool kids, when we were in college, cool kids carried a guitar. Today, cool kids in a college have a startup. So the nature of aspirations and the kind of ambition the youth are holding are different. They're no longer looking for that safe, secure, salaried employment, which perhaps even our generation sought, right? And this is a reflection of, so managing expectations is a very important part of this decision. The second is, of course, there is a growing divide between an educational degree and actual skill in the market. Because while we are seeing that our educated youth are more likely to sit at home, the industry is also repeatedly telling us our biggest constraint is skilled manpower. It's not finance anymore. We can raise the finance. Skilled manpower is our biggest constraint to growth. How can the two coexist? The two coexist because degrees and skills that the market values and is willing to pay for, there is a growing divide, which is why you must appreciate Skill India. Skill India is an effort to bridge the gap, to get industry into the classroom and to get the classroom out into the workspace. That is the big divide. Now I want to talk a little bit about agriculture. Right? These are all snippets of lots of research, but it's important because these are structural aspects of the economy. The whole brouhaha we had around the farm laws. For the last 40 years, economists on the left, right, center, whatever your political orientation, everybody agreed that we need farm reforms. We needed those farm laws, but we couldn't prevail, right? And I want to showcase to you why Punjab, it is a case study today. Punjab is that black line. Punjab used to be the richest state of the union until 18 years back, not very long. 18 years is all it took. The richest state of India, when an average Haryanvi was poorer, average Himachali, all these states were poorer than Punjab. Today, an average Haryanvi is 1.5 times richer than an average Punjabi. Himachal Pradesh has taken off. You see what has happened, and this is why the debate on freebies, and you've heard the Prime Minister talk about it. This is the public debate we will have to have. And Punjab remains a case study of why we cannot continue with these kind of policies. Punjab, the richest state, is an agricultural state. It continued to cross-subsidize agriculture by almost penalizing industry. So industry has to pay a lot more for energy just to sustain the high subsidies to agriculture. Now, when that happens, and couple that with poor labor laws, etc., and regulatory burden, what happens to industry in today's day and age? They are not stuck to a state anymore. They will move. So what happened to most of the industries in Punjab? They moved. Where did they go to? Some actually went beyond to Vietnam, China, etc., but almost the whole bulk moved to Himachal, Haryana, Manesar, Rajasthan, that whole belt. So in a competitive federal structure, which India is today, and every state is hungry to get more investment, no state can continue with such regressive policies. Of course, when you make electricity or power very, very cheap for any group of producers, in this case farmers, Punjab is growing rice. They don't have rainfall, but they're growing rice. You can imagine what that does to the ecology. So it has one of the fastest decline in water table. When we were in college, almost our schools, our sports equipments came from Punjab. A lot of textiles, woolens, everything came from Punjab. Punjab today has seen such rapid deindustrialization. Industries have moved out. And deindustrialization in today's day and age, you can imagine what that means for jobs. It's a border state, so there are all kinds of other repercussions. So this becomes a case study on why distortionary policies of this nature not sustainable. We have to have a serious debate. Occasionally you've heard politicians say, if you have the budget, you can spend it. However, regressive the policy. But that's not actually true. It's not about budget. Punjab had the budget. It was true that they were taking from one side and giving to the other. They had the budget at that point. But in economics, we often talk about incentives. What will this do to your budget in 20 years? There is no more budget. Industry has moved. So incentive, you have to understand. Over time, bad policies become very, very difficult to reverse. Now, this is something, these are the last couple of slides. I've started to talk a great deal because I think people aren't quite aware of the micro-revolution that this country is witnessing. Just the kind of serious outreach and growth in terms of access to amenities that we are seeing across the country, it is unprecedented. It is unprecedented anywhere. I'm showing you here the bottom 20%, meaning the poorest people in each state, what has happened to the access to electricity. In 2014-15, access to electricity for the poorest in any state was around 53%. Today, it is around 86%. We have 19 states and union territories where the poorest in the state has more than 95% access to electricity. Can you comprehend what is the nature of this transformation that is happening in the real economy? What does access to electricity do? Children study more, businesses can run longer, you can work longer, many things, entertainment, media. Access to electricity is like a foundational rock on which economies get built, right? Now, here is an answer to the question of, yes, but the rhetoric that you hear in the media all the time, that only some segments are receiving it and not everyone. Well, that same electricity for the poorest, I break it down across Hindu, Muslim, general, OBC, SC, ST. Just look at the result. In 2014-15, 50% of poorest Muslim households had electricity. Today, that number is 86%. In 2014-15, 52% Hindus had it, the poorest. Today, it is 85%. So the economic growth in terms of development and access to amenities is truly inclusive in this country. And you're seeing what is happening with other social categories. You're seeing a resurgence, a huge improvement in access. Now, an important thing to bear in mind is this going to show up in the GDP overnight or the inequality metrics? No. It doesn't show up overnight. Because accessing electricity, what you do with that additional time and access, it comes with time. It takes a couple of years. We have seen this historically in every country, including the US, Europe, etc., where it is very well documented that when electricity comes or roads come, productivity, labor productivity rises, and within 10 years you see a remarkable gap in the real economy. So these are the foundational stone, these are the foundational work of the real economy which is being set in motion. I want to end with this slide, simply as a word of caution, because we are sitting, we are talking in a media house event. I want to talk to you a little bit about an area in economics called narrative economics. You know, earlier in corporate finance, we would often study this, and it's very well documented, that companies float stories about themselves. And you do it strategically so that it impacts the share price. It is no longer a phenomenon that we only see in corporate finance. It is very much becoming a phenomenon for real global economy. Okay? This is a graph that looks at tone of media. And this data includes hundreds of millions of data points from Google. So all media, more than 100 languages, global media, more than 100 languages, they are in this data. Using natural language processes, because data is very powerful, we can do a lot of things with data. Natural language processing, we can actually put a tone to the coverage of the particular episode. Is it a good coverage, positive, is it negative? And you can assign a value on how good and how bad, okay? This is so the universe of this study, when I started looking at it, it starts at the beginning of the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, look at the global media coverage for all major economies, China, Sweden, India, US, Germany. Everyone's getting negative coverage because that is the role of the media. The media's job is to highlight problems. So everything looked fine. What happened within 6 months of the pandemic? While the democracies of the world, and that is why I have picked these countries, Sweden and Germany are relatively smaller democracies and more homogeneous, large federal country like US and India, all of them are getting negative coverage. In fact, that big blip you see is Donald Trump. That is the election in the US. Media's coverage of these countries has remained negative. What has happened of China, however, what do you see? The global media coverage of China has not only over time completely decoupled, they're getting positive coverage globally now. This is called media management. This is called narrative economics. This is not a random fact. This is something which is created. So this, in some sense, is a measure I have given you of how narratives are created. Now, this goes back to the oldest saying that the universe is not made of atoms. The universe is made of stories. And who controls the stories is eventually trying to control the universe. So don't believe everything that you read. Don't believe everything that you hear. That's the power of research and data, that you have to go back and verify some of these things. So this is the reality of the world we live in. This is all media. It's global. It's not Indian media. It's not US media. Global media. And over time, we have begun to hear news of how Bolivian media house got bought by China, Argentinian media house got bought. So you know what is the kind of change that the global economy, from a media perspective, media is what tells us about the situation in the world. It is not what you hear or see. It goes much deeper than that. So I will end with that. I'm very happy to take questions and chat more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ravi, for that very engaging and enlightening presentation on what India must prepare itself for. It was a pleasure to hear your presentation, but shortly from now, I'm going to request you to come back on stage, because also, like Arnab mentioned, today amongst us is someone you all know from Pune especially very, very well, Mr. Ravi-Navani, as a digital futurist entrepreneur, like you've known him. Many of you also know him as the chairman and MD of the Indian arm of Jetline Group and Jet Synthesis. You may also know him as the technologist who is an ex-NASA engineer with prominent investments in the metaverse, machine learning, and tech space. But what many of you don't know is that Mr. Ravi-Navani is part of the founding team of Republic. Of course, Arnab did share that with us. In fact, his co-working space, Garage, is where Republic first took roots. So to him, we owe our origin and location. As the founder and CEO of Jet Synthesis, he has a vision to digitally transform India. With Jet Synthesis, he has ensured that world-class digital products and platforms that are built in India and have a deep impact in the nation and across the world. It gives me immense pleasure to invite him on stage for an invigorating conversation with Professor Shamika Ravi once again. Thank you. And would invite both of you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Republic TV. Thank you, Arnab, for those kind words. And thank you for being and doing this here in Pune, as we had discussed last time. I think it's always a pleasure to have a conversation around India, have a conversation around the future of India and our role in the world. And I think what better platform than to do it here at Republic with you. So again, thank you. And Shamika, thank you. I think you laid out a phenomenal presentation. Really, which took us through the journey of India relative to so many other countries on so many different factors. And, I think the one thing that stood out from your, presentation and the way I look at this conversation, since, she mentioned we got to make it invigorating, is the fact that the future of India is really in the hands of our youth. And I don't think it's only the future of India, it's the future of the world. Because 1 in 10 people in the world today is an Indian under the age of 25. Now, if we have that kind of a demography and that kind of a demographic power, there is no way, as Arnab, you rightly mentioned, that hockey stick moment, of the next 25 years, as we look and envision what India will be in 2047, is not created on the back of this demographic dividend that we have, the ability for us, like you rightly said, to skill them, to build capacity in them so that they can not only create a difference in terms of what they can produce for the world, but also will eventually become the highest consumers in the world, and actually take that across the Gen Zs around the world, which is also going to be the largest population which is going to be employable over the future. So I think the moment is very, very right, and I don't think many a times you get a moment in the history of a country when a developing country of 1.4 billion people with such a large youth demographic advantage can actually transform itself from a developing country to a developed country over the next 25 years. I don't think in the history of mankind it has happened. And I say a democratic country that's doing that. And I think that's the beauty of our India where we are today and the future. And I think what you rightly said, is what has brought us here definitely won't take us there. And I think this dialogue is here today to see how can we turbocharge, how can we accelerate, how can we create an order of magnitude change which is disproportionate to what would happen if we were just to incrementally do more of the same, and really see how we can make that India come alive, as a part of this discussion and as a part of these dialogues that will only strengthen the base and the foundation on which we will build that. And I think, Shamika, you and I were talking earlier that this conversation needs to, run across multiple stakeholders. It's got to have government, it's got to have corporate, it's got to have civil society to really have these conversations in a positive, meaningful manner, because it's only when we understand each other that we will be able to bring about, significant change that is well-founded on principles that, we all talk about all the time. So again, I think with that little context, I think we'll just take this conversation further. I truly believe that the future of India would, come about more, and you mentioned very, very well, about well-structured reforms, policies that actually have the ability, to be able to strengthen over a long-term period. How do we build capacity? How do we really look at, building India in multiple aspects from a GDP growth rate? So if we really come to our economy and we say that if India were to become a $26 trillion economy by 2047, or even a $40 trillion as some, we need to be able to ensure we have, anywhere between 6 to 8, actually 10% kind of a growth rate, for a country like India. How do we really make that happen? What, according to you, from all the statistics and figures that you shared, what would be those 2 or 3 drivers, that will enable us to really, get onto that path? And really, how can the budget this year, help us address that?
Thank you for that extremely comprehensive question. Oh, Rajan, we have to either keep the next 100 years in mind, or we can get lost in the budget. And I think I like the fact that, Arnab, look, this year it's the final budget of, a final budget of the government before they go into elections. If you read the leaves, the tea leaves, in fact, we have done a paper and I recommend you read it. We do natural language processing to study the budget speeches of the last 50 years of India's independence. So you read the finance minister's budget speeches and you see exactly what we focus on. Some things have been taboo for a very long period of time, such as privatization. And there is, of course, now an effort to reverse it. It's not an easy task, and I think we all appreciate that. But I think budget is really, we make a bigger deal of it. I think a lot of the action is beyond the budget. And with this government, if you see the big reforms that have happened, in fact, pandemic time is when a lot of our reforms actually did happen. But we had a conversation with the Prime Minister last week. He had called a group of economists. And there is a distinction in the way some of us see this from the way typically macroeconomists view the economy. Macroeconomists look at economy more from an accounting perspective. No, private investment ghat raha hai, isko badhana hai. Exports badhana hai. So these are like, income is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. But the real economy is much more than that. How do you reverse private investment? How do you instill greater faith in the business community the way you have, right? Well, how do you get a commitment like that over the next few generations? One thing, we have to continue to become more business friendly. And it is, again, not the job of the federal government alone, but you saw the unemployment numbers. The states have a great role to play. And some states have played that role. In fact, this cooperative and sometimes competitive federal structure works in our favor right now, because we are not losing businesses to outside world. States are losing to one another, so in net, that is still fine for us. But the others are catching up. That's a great thing. That's the beauty of competition in many ways. But human capital, Rajan, is at the end of the day, you build a nation, people build nations, and you build a nation on the back of skilled, educated manpower, and healthy population. Strategically, if you see, the OECD countries, which are the richest, most affluent countries, they are aging. And they're aging quite rapidly. No country in the world has managed to reduce healthcare expenditure on account of this. Every country is right now battling healthcare expenditure. therein lies our opportunity. In fact, even China, the biggest fear that China has structurally, because of some of their faulty policies in the past, but we are where we are, they have a real fear that they are going to become old before they actually become rich. China is a middle-income country today, and not even a high middle-income country. It's a mid-middle-income country. We are a low middle-income country. But the demographics are still in our favor. So if we know that there is a global demand for healthcare, and by healthcare I mean there is human resource in healthcare, so you need more doctors, nurses, etc., paramedics and so on. You also need specialized health IT. In fact, a lot of the AI solutions which are emerging, which are getting deployed in the market, are in healthcare, because such is the desperation of healthcare costs. You have to reduce it. Then, of course, I mean, we have fancied ourselves, and rightfully so, being pharmacy to the world, but we have to continue to build on that. We have to manufacture and design and do the required R&D. So healthcare now has to be viewed as an engine of growth, not as a social sector. And I think that is a sort of a change we need to bring about in policymakers, and I think in the market at large. Right?
Yeah, I think in health, particularly when we look at, again, the young demography, wellness has become a key driver of that. And if you're looking at, countries around the world, I was in Singapore on a thing, and I think they're all looking at how the state expenditure will happen towards keeping people healthy rather than addressing, the state subsidies. So I think all of these subjects will become mainstream. And I think India has an opportunity to kind of, take that forward. You talked of China, right? At a time when the world is talking today in, moving, tracks to a supply chain of China plus one, I think 2047 from, everyone should be talking an India plus one strategy, right? And if we have to bring that shift, right? Not only that, it will be China plus India, which is what everybody's talking today, but if the conversation has to be, we have to have an India plus one strategy. Again, this next 25 years, what are those few things that you feel need to be addressed on priority? Because you've been closely watching, the developments, and what do you think needs to get done?
I think earlier the complaint used to be the infrastructure sucks, that it takes forever to move things and so on. I think on the infrastructure front, Rajan, we have come a long way. And I showed you data only for electricity and that too for the poorest. But if you just look at the connectivity in this country, the road network, electricity, there is a networked economy which is getting created from state to state, which is great. Today, I think our biggest constraint remains skill. And I think in terms of adoption of technology, we need for businesses to also adopt. And I think that is where the competition that our businesses are facing today are not as much from the external global players right now, but more from, across each other. I think striking and imbibing a greater sense of competition, which perhaps will lead, or the market forces you to adapt technology. We need those kind of ease of doing businesses, and we need the kind of competition policies. So on the policy front, tons of work beyond finance. I think we somehow limit our conversations on economy to access to finance. So the finance ministry is expected to put this much into that sector and so much. I think the conversation has to go much, much beyond finance, because industry after industry, almost all surveys that we do, including the annual survey of industries, the markets, the businesses are telling you it's not capital. Capital we will figure out. It's more the real skills. It is the regulatory burden which we still have. In fact, the Prime Minister's call now is to decriminalize, there is a bill being prepared, to decriminalize a lot of economic business activities, right? The Factories Act, etc., which are archaic. So you don't want this kind of a Damocles sword to be hung on a business's back all the time when you're thinking of starting something or innovating. And I think that requires, one, from the policy perspective, but when I spoke about expectation management, I think as a community, as people, I think even religious leaders and so on, as a community, we need to become more risk-taking, and we need to allow the youth to take on risk, meaning it's okay to fail. This is a different generation. I think they understand it, but the elders don't. The elders are still looking for the safe livelihood. And that mindset requires a community-wise change in expectations.
Yeah, no, I think technology and what you rightly mentioned, startups and entrepreneurship, is going to be the driver of economic strength and can create, massive change fairly quickly. The other segment of society, and I think our Prime Minister also alluded, Yuva Shakti and Nari Shakti, and you mentioned in your presentation, you'll talk a little bit about that, right? There's so many educated women who are not part of the employable workforce today. How do we change that narrative? How do we really get that other power to get unlocked if we truly want to realize our aspirations for India at 100?
That is a deeply personal question. That is also, as an economist, I must tell you, it is not an easy question. And let me try and explain why. In India, a working age group woman, meaning a woman from the age of 18 to 60, on an average spends 7 hours per day taking care of either children or the elderly. 7 hours per day is spent on what we call care economy. This is average. What about women who are working? Women who are working in that age group are also spending on an average 4 hours a day. Can you imagine the amount of value that is getting created in the household? But it's not a part of our GDP. Why? Because it is not a marketable transaction. In the OECD countries, and mostly of the West, this is a marketable activity, meaning it's a transaction. You get someone, you pay a nanny, you pay a daycare, you pay for someone to come and take care. So it's a marketable transaction, so it shows up in the GDP. Here, it is done in the household, so it is discounted. We are not measuring it. But as a statistician, that's an easy fix. I can impute a value. By the way, we do that in agriculture. When we decide on MSP, we actually calculate own production, own family, how much labor time is spent, and we decide on an MSP based on that. So statistically it can be done, but the problem is not merely statistical. The pandemic has shown us, and this is a deeply, I think, for Indians, it's something personal to all of us. Historically we are seeing the largest number of elderly without kin, meaning without family. There is a breakdown of the family structure. So we have to now think and ask ourselves that women entering labor force in marketable activities, it's a very precarious path, but we have to tread it. How much of these can be outside of the household? Meaning, is it a marketable activity? Because making care marketable activity, while it's leading to longer lives, it is also leading to, in many measures, miserable life, the life of loneliness. So we saw that during the pandemic, so many old age homes, because again comorbidities, etc. were involved, lots of elderly died alone. So the breakdown of the family structure is also closely linked with women working outside. As a working mother, you can understand why we feel so closely about it. But the statistical fix is an easy one. The real policy fix and the society fix is what will take time. We have to get the men to pitch in. 7 hours per day is being spent on care. It is unsustainable, which is why Japanese women not having children. Increasingly, Chinese women, despite change in policy, don't want to have children. Scandinavians don't want to have children. So these kind of reversal that you see, it is not an outcome of policy of a government. Sometimes it is just the way the community responds. We have to get our men to pitch into maintenance and sustenance of family. Rearing and bearing children cannot be disproportionately. Cost should not be borne only by the women, not sustainable. Not sustainable.
So a structural generational shift in the way society operates, I think, is required on multiple angles, right? I think, when you see Japan talking of a society 5.0, which is built on technology as a, base around which everything in society will function, since you raised Japan, and the family structures of India, I think a lot, will change and get disrupted. I think we anyways live in a very uncertain world. But, coming back more again to the economy, and if we were to look, for the next 2 years and 3 years, to be able to realize and unlock what we are talking of, putting India back. I mean, we are still already on one of the fastest growing countries, but on the higher growth track from where we are. What could be, as I said, I'm pushing you again on one or two of those key drivers, that we should see, or what should we address today, collectively, right? What you rightly said, if government raises something, how does industry respond? Is it increasing, like we've talked of the manufacturing power of India, we talk of the services power, we talk of the innovation power, right? How do we really, grow that? So where do you see, 2 or 3 of the priorities which are immediate and now, and then we'll open it up to some questions from the audience.
I think we need to continue working on building confidence within the business community, Rajan. Our private investments have to rise. We cannot have long-term sustainable exponential growth on the back of government spending. Our private investments have been falling for the last 10 years. And that has to be reversed. That will not get reversed by simply asking for it. That will require, that will not even just get done by changing rules. And here I'm saying the state, which is not merely the government, our laws also, right? If you remember the coal allocation and the annulment, after 18 years of allocation, our judiciary also has to be sensitized to the fact that you need an economic training in understanding that 18 years is a generation. In 18 years, an entire economy emerged out of the coal allocation. So when we said this is wrong and we annul it, it tells us that we are not looking at the economy and livelihood and what does it do to the future of our children and grandchildren. We are looking at judgments as right and wrong, not as an intelligent judgment, that what is required for well-being of the community and the nation as a whole. So I think that's why I say it has to go beyond government. The government is a very large part of it. When we say reduce regulatory burden, that is the rules, and the rules are changing. Mark my words, there is tremendous pressure on Delhi and within, to the administration to decriminalize things, continue to make things smoother from the regulatory perspective. But the confidence building that is required will require this continued work from the judiciary, from the government, and for the businesses to continue to work closely with.
Yeah, I think the key word here is trust, right? How do we build trust between government, industry, civil society? And I think that's a virtuous cycle. Because once the trust comes, I think, and the alignment that comes, we can, continue to grow ahead. I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions, if from the audience someone would like to ask.
All right, hi, this is Abhishek. Professor Ravi, you gave that presentation on structural reforms with all those graphs and numbers. What I think everyone here would want to understand is what has changed, which has brought in this scale in all these statistics, electricity, reach, for example, or the one that you gave.
What has changed?
What has changed that has led to that scale of achievement in those structural reforms? Because structural reforms have been going on since early 90s. Always, but yes. I think what has changed recently is perhaps the scale.
Right. I think it's a priority that, that Prime Minister Modi's government, and I think it is also driven right from the top. In fact, it might sound to you as a rhetoric, and for academics like us who look at numbers and read, it took a considerable amount of research and reading and comprehension to realize that we have to acknowledge there is something called political entrepreneurship. If you continue to look at the past data and predict what we should be doing, you will always discount disruptors like Prime Minister Modi at the center, but also leaders who bring about change. Narasimha Rao did it at one point. You discount it at state level. Chandrababu Naidu did it, right? Again, Modi in Gujarat did it. You have to understand political entrepreneurs are people who will disrupt, who do give an agenda, and they drive it right from the top. In fact, there is an excellent Lancet study which looks at Swachh Bharat. That why is it that the toilet, it's not like we didn't have the means. How did India build over 100 million toilets within a few years? And toilets, right? It took a mission right from the top, and it took a prime minister for him to walk the streets with a broom and make it a priority. So I think, in organizational behavior literature, you have to understand the governance and how governments will react. A lot of it is driven on how clear the mission is and what is the level of monitoring and auditing that happens on a regular basis. So Swachh Bharat is an excellent example of how it got done. By extension, I think electricity, and this is the power of democracy as well. We have to understand that people, and particularly I think women voters in India, we call it a silent revolution, no longer silent, but last 15, 20 years, women coming out and voting in large numbers has changed the nature of Indian democracy. Women are not voting for abstract concepts. They are voting for water, electricity, safety. This is very well established in the literature. And I think the truly statesmen and the politicians with ears on the ground are responding in kind. You are seeing this state after state, election after election. Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. I am a teenager right now, and I am no economics major, and I'm still a student. So I wanted to ask a question. So I'm obviously thinking about the next 25 years of my life. So due to the automation which is happening right now, due to machines taking place instead of humans, and of course, like the way you talked about the production, like we are not financially productive right now. So after 2 or 3 years, there will be a surge in the skilled labor because like everyone will graduate, like you said, that right now they might be just giving exams, etc. So when they actually graduate and enter the working class, the employment which should actually rise might just generate more unemployment because like right now, like 2 or 3 days before, India hit the first place in population. So what do you propose is an effective way to deal with this? Because I, as an Indian citizen, how can I be secure in my employment opportunities when there is a lot of automation and unemployment taking place? Thank you so much.
Great question, Rajan.
Yeah, you want to take it first, then I'll add to that. Yeah.
So, excellent question, young lady, and a very valid one. But remember that don't think of yourself as a passive job seeker. You're also likely to become a job giver. A lot of entrepreneurship is about innovation, new ideas, and every time a business gets established, they also employ a few. So that is number one. The fear on automation, I think it's a genuine fear. But the more we read and understand the latent changes that are happening on account of automation, I think the nature of jobs that humans will do will change. Meaning we are going to use, machines for simpler tasks, right? But creativity, right? Arts, music, empathy. In fact, that is why I continue to talk about the care economy so much. At the end of the day, people will need people to hold their hands when they fall sick. There are going to be many, many jobs for humans. I think the job for humans is also likely to change, but it is no longer going to be what we thought 25 years back. That if we learn coding, and I did engineering, I'm fine. Nobody's fine anymore. So you need to continue being creative.
We talked about like what has brought us here won't take us there, right? Your question really fits right there, right? Today, learning is not a one-time thing. You have to be a lifelong learner, right? It's not about, one job for a lifetime, but it's, a lifetime of careers, which is achieved in one lifetime. I think there are many, many aspects to the way the young generation will look at livelihoods and livelihood enhancement, the livelihood mobility, and therefore I think the capacity to be able to adapt and learn and do that, relatively quickly as a nation is probably going to drive us. But a big advantage, at least for India, is that there is aging population around the world, and I think Indians are driving a large part of the global workforce and will continue to do that in many ways. But one thing that you see historically, when there were carriages and when cars came in, people thought it's the end of the world, and there are going to be no jobs for people to do. So every revolution that has happened has actually created more jobs than there were ever existed. And I think that's the beauty of this generation. Of course, with machines, we got to address the ethics of AI. We got to address how tomorrow, if a machine is giving direction to man, how does that work? And I think that's where governments, I think multilaterally, need to come together to define some frameworks and standards within which the world will move. And I think that's the excitement, but also the challenge for all of our generation.
I think it's a huge challenge, Rajan. I think on the AI and the ethics, and also remember that there is a reason that certain, and COVID might have been an outcome of that. We're not entertaining conspiracy theory here, but there are certain kinds of research which I think countries like India will resist, which China did not, right? certain kinds of, because there are ethical concerns, and I think there are many more filters. Democracies lend themselves to, I think, a lot more noise, of course, in the short run. But in the long run, there are more course correction mechanisms in-house. And because of that, in AI, we might feel occasionally frustrated that we aren't. After all, we have so much data. And AI is all about how much and what is the variation that you have in the data. Because more diverse the data, the richer the data, the more precise or better the AI solution is likely to be. So other than China and India, no other country has this bandwidth to do it in the future. Sometimes we get frustrated that we were leaders in IT. 15 years back, the Chinese would come here and study Bangalore model, and now look where they are. But I think sometimes, that's the reason I showed you a lot of these graphs, that you need to step back and not get lost in the noise of it, and see that the general direction is in the right direction.
Yeah, and what you say, but if you really see the few trillion-dollar companies that have got created in the world, most of them being technology companies in the US, and all of them have a lot of Indian talent that has gone to shape that. As a matter of fact, Indian leadership there that is shaping that. And you raise a great question, because I think it's a perfect way to end, that the future of the world is going to be driven by multiple technologies. A chip in the brain is going to enhance your capacity like you cannot even imagine, right? What happens, because we operate at 7% of our capacity of the brain, if everybody's human brain is expanded by a few percentage points just by putting a chip? I mean, you look at drone technology, what it's doing to mobility. You take blockchain and the way it has democratized the world, forget the cryptocurrency and all of that, but the power of blockchain to be able to transform every single industry, enterprise-wise, around the future, are all exciting changes that are happening at the same time when there are wars taking place, when there is, so much of conflict in the world, so many challenges, but so much, opportunity. And that's the uncertain world that, India has got an opportunity to navigate both geopolitically, economically, and strengthen our position, to becoming a global leader by 2047. So again, thank you. Thank you, Shamika. I think it's been a, great conversation around where India can go, and let's see how we can all play our little role to make it happen. Thank you.
If I may, I want to give a real-world example of what is happening in healthcare. In Uttar Pradesh, we don't have very good, primary health centers are not that great run. Human resource is the biggest constraint. So you know what? Now one of the solutions, and Rajan, it struck me only when you were talking, that many of the primary health centers, when patients go, there is a nurse and a paramedic who's writing down, but the computer is linked to a doctor in Telangana. And so the Telangana doctor is basically looking and seeing patients, only because telemedicine is possible today. But of course, the ethical concerns remain, right? Like today when we say a phone, is a phone a part of me? Should someone just have access to it? After all, it is like my brain. It's an extension of my brain. So it's not going to be so easy. We will have a lot more ethical and legal things to think through, but the opportunities are infinite. And we all end on this hugely optimistic note. That this is where the action is.
And you'll be probably one of those job creators, right? As an entrepreneur, so not a job seeker. So don't worry about the jobs that will come the way of others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ravi and Mr. Navani, for such an interesting and captivating conversation. The insights from this conversation that have given all of us a lot to think about. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to our next segment. India is the third largest economy in the world in terms of purchasing power parity. The world is bullish on the country's growth. India is being called an independent powerhouse. And India may become the third largest economy by 2030. Overtaking Japan and Germany. But what is needed to materialize these projections is the question. How can the India growth story be catalyzed by Budget 2023? And what will top economists be looking out for in Budget 2023? Our esteemed guests, expert economists, read the tea leaves on the Indian economy. This next discussion is on India's economic present and future. Before that, let's play out this AV.
India's economy has emerged as an outlier amid global gloom. There is global confidence in India's markets. Highest annual FDI inflow of $83.57 billion last year. India's equities are hitting an all-time high. India's 5G market is expected to expand by 70%. India is gearing up to carve a position in the top 3 economies. But how do we catalyze this growth curve? Now we decode the prospects for the future. Republic Media Network presents India's Economic Present and Future, a SWOT analysis.
And I'd now like to invite the panel, Ms. Kavita Chako, who is the Chief Economist at Nuvama Wealth Research. Her work is focused on macroeconomic research covering the Indian and global economy. With almost 2 decades of experience in diverse organizations, Ms. Chako has keen insights on economic research, credit rating, and market research. She's previously worked with Care Ratings. As a senior economist, she's also worked at Angel Broking and the National Commodity and Derivatives Exchange, that is NCDEX, as an economist. Let's have a huge round of applause for her. Also next we have with us Professor R.K. Patnaik. He is a professor at the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Pune. He holds a PhD from IIT Mumbai in Applied Economics. He has taught at various top universities and was working with the RBI in the past. As part of the RBI, Dr. Patnaik was involved in IMF Article 4 consultation meetings and has been a key member in various policy-making committees of the government and RBI. Can we have on stage Professor R.K. Patnaik? Let's welcome him with a louder round of applause. Thank you all. And of course, on stage, I'd like to call Republic's Senior Executive Editor, Abhishek Kapoor. Abhishek has a bachelor's in engineering, a master's in communication studies, and a degree in law. He has been at various institutes and a fellow of Press Ombudsman of Sweden in 2002. He's a keen observer of all matters of the economy, local to global, and he will be moderating this session today. So let's welcome them all before we begin.
Very good morning to you all. Professor Ravi has just left. You need to be an economist woman to be telling your age from this stage, She just left. I would have wanted to tell this to her. Okay, so we are heading into a budget cycle. Everyone would be talking about taxes, what's in store for them. Like I was just, while preparing, reading a headline where it says, the Indian Helmet Association says, please reduce taxes on helmets. I believe Kavita Chako could say that, I don't comment on individual industry. Professor Patnaik might in fact give a spin that, if the taxes are reduced on helmets, many more people would buy helmets and save their lives. So essentially, these are the kind of pulls and pressures under which the Union Finance Minister and the team that assists her works in. I thought, since we are economically, financially, business-wise literate audience, let's do a sort of a SWOT analysis of where Indian economy really stands. What are the headwinds, tailwinds? What's helping the team of the Union Finance Minister in scripting that budget speech, which must be in the works? Our guests have been introduced, panelists. And if I could, as I said, we divide this into 3 parts. First, we do a sort of a SWOT analysis, discuss the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats the Indian economy is facing. Then we do a bit of a discussion on fiscal situation, because that's essentially what drives the government, and in many ways the numbers drive the markets. And then I would, run our panelists through some headlines, and let's try to understand through those headlines where we are really headed into. So let's begin with our SWOT analysis. If I could begin with Professor Patnaik first. So in terms of our strengths, it's Arnab mentioned about the chief economist who said that for the next couple of decades, India would be the story. So what are the strengths which makes the world say so? So the demography, for example, the demographic dividend. Then we have our enterprise. We are sort of becoming the enterprise capital of the world. Every other day you are hearing of new unicorns, which is typically a $1 billion enterprise, the fintech. A prime minister is very fond of talking about the digital public goods. And the manner in which India has really developed an expertise which can be exported. So the Aadhaar-backed digital public goods that India is delivering to its masses. And political stability, I thought, is one strength. So, sir, according to you, strengths of Indian economy, and then I'll come to Kavita.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Republic TV. Let me start. My current professor for last 12 years, for 13 years, as a teacher, teaching macroeconomics related subject. While Professor Ravi is not there, she said, y is equal to c plus I plus g, plus x minus m, that is export-import. I will add one p, politics. So political stability, Abhishek, as you said, that is the greatest strength is that. The second is working with the governors, deputy governors, and respecting the students. I have developed one thing, one words. So in one word, if I will say, what is the Indian economy strength? It is resilience. We are a resilient economy. Let me explain this first. How we are resilient. Look, what is the problem in the world currently? We have advanced economies, US, Euro area, Japan. We have emerging and developing economies, India, China, BRICS, we can, all of us know here. How we have handled it? We have high inflation everywhere. We have high inflation in US, we have high inflation in Euro area. We had also high inflation in India. The point is, they had a mandate of 2%. Let us take CPI inflation or personal consumption expenditure. They reached 9%. Euro area has gone to double digit. How did they address it? That is the difference. That is our strength.
Yeah.
And how did we address it? They have gone for aggressive monetary policy tightening. And there is cautions after caution with the IMF report, World Bank report. But we have gone with a measured and calibrated policy. That is our strength. So what happened?
Right.
If you look at the data, most of these advanced economies, they increase their policy rate, whatever way. I'm not going to be technical here. Very aggressively they raised it. And there are some students, as I understand, with economics minor or major. So all of us know, technically if I put it, there is a Phillips curve. That means there is a growth inflation trade-off. If you handle inflation in any country, growth is to be sacrificed. And that has precisely happened in the world.
Right. We come to that, have a detailed discussion on that, sir.
So our strength is in all these concepts, as I said,
right.
Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus X.
Yeah.
If you look at the data, I will just conclude with this, then
we
can take up. What happens here, sometimes back, the Honorable PM said 5 trillion economy. It was heartening to know the IMF is saying 2027, with the pandemic and all, little bit we dragged out, but will be a 5.4 trillion economy.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, when Stephen Hawking was writing his book, A Brief History of Time, his publishers told him that for every one equation you write on a page, the readership goes by half. So I'll try, despite discussing economics, not to bring in equations. Kavita, you know, since you are from FinTech, FinTech is one area of strength. And the internal consumption story. So your turn, strengths as we head into the budget cycle for Indian economy.
Okay, I'm not technically from FinTech, okay, I'm from finance.
Right.
Okay, but here when it comes to strengths, one of the main strengths is the digitalization which we have seen now in the last few years. Okay, that and the other policy areas which have been the focus. Okay, one is digitalization, one is the fiscal policy also.
Just a little closer.
Okay.
Yeah,
yeah sorry.
Just closer.
Okay, yeah. So we have had the physical infrastructure, which is the gaps which are there, which is being fast narrowed or rather being taken care of. Okay, and all these factors collectively okay, are our strengths currently. And all of these are beginning to bear fruit now and in the coming years. Okay. Also, we have the well understood and acknowledged demographic dividend which is there. Okay. And we also have a sizable portion of skilled resources, English-speaking skilled resources. Also resources who are skilled in engineering, science, mathematics, okay? So these are the areas of our strength which will help us develop further and which will be developed further going ahead.
All right, so coming to weaknesses, that's how it works. Certain red flags in the economy, sir. For example, the subsidies bill. Of course, someone in the government is doing some smart thinking. So for example, we know the Prime Minister's, the ration scheme of the COVID period has been dovetailed into the National Food Security Act, and that really saves about 80,000 crore rupees per annum, and that is direct saving so far as the fiscal is concerned. So, but then still the subsidies bill on both food, fertilizer, fuel, it remains a bit of a concern. I'm talking about the red flags, the current account deficit, for example. It has crossed 4%, and the fact that there are some headwinds of the global economy which could impact our exports. So the CAD is an area of concern. Your thoughts on the weaknesses that we have as of now? Skills, for example, are we really properly leveraged insofar as the skilling India is concerned? Your thoughts? Skills, skill set.
I will...
you can add your own weakness.
No, that's fine. I will take this question this way. What is the weakness of Indian economy? Look, this question has to be taken little differently. Fiscal sector, let me first take it out this. We had a 2004 fiscal rule to 2018 fiscal rule, nearly 14 years, and if you count by the calendar year or fiscal year, nearly 18 years, we had the fiscal management. I was the good fortune to be a part of drafting the 2003
FRBM
Act. This is the weakness of this. Many of us do not understand what is deficit. That's the major problem in policy making.
Yeah.
Indian budget, because we go by the market. Many of the media people also, we go by the market. Because the market does not understand revenue deficit, implication of revenue deficit. So we will go for fiscal deficit, the borrowing, because the market is interested in borrowing. But the Indian budget tells us revenue deficit has to be zero. We got rid of this. Once you got rid of revenue deficit, then you have no control over the fiscal deficit.
True.
That's what we did. That is a major weakness, I would say. And sometimes back, the audience may pardon me for my digression, we introduce a very confusing deficit concept, which is another our weakness. Thanks to 15th Finance Commission, they said you should get out of this effective revenue deficit. So now putting emphasis only on fiscal deficit is our major policy weakness.
Right.
So that's what I will say first.
Right.
Second, as you said, in the external sector, we have some weaknesses.
Right.
The first weakness, I will say, we have built up of reserves. And Abhishek, you must be knowing, yesterday, RBI put its website, the state of economy.
Yes.
So state of economy is a must read for all of us. And usually they say, where are the best economists available in the world? The best economists are in the central bank.
Right.
That is a famous comment and quotation I can say. So they have done a beautiful analysis of state of economy. I will only pick up two things. They are saying our reserves can finance 9 months of import.
Yes.
It's a crude way. My submission to this August gathering is residual maturity, short-term debt.
Right.
Short-term debt in residual maturity. It is huge. More than 53, 54%. And we are thriving, or we are successful, because there is a simultaneous borrowing and repayment.
what you're saying is that the situation of public debt vis-a-vis the GDP,
No,
that ratio.
I'm saying the external sector. I'm not talking about the domestic sector.
Okay.
External sector, we are borrowing.
Yeah.
We are borrowing through external commercial borrowing, World Bank and other places. NRI deposit also.
Yes.
So there is a short-term borrowing of 1 year. Short-term borrowing of longer-term maturity also maturing within 1 year.
Right.
So that as a percentage to reserves, forex reserves, is very huge.
That's actually a strength or weakness.
That is a weakness.
A short-term borrowing is weakness, of course.
Short-term borrowing is a weakness.
Yes.
So we have to look at that.
Right.
I would request all the media papers,
that's a weakness.
those who are doing the analysis, to look at this. We can very well say
that's a significant aspect.
that is a significant
but
issue. One has to be very carefully say this.
Yeah.
Second aspect is, just one more point I will
Sure.
add. Our export potentiality. There is a mistaken view that if rupee depreciate, export will go up. But I would submit, export will go if there is a demand for export outside the country.
True. I believe depreciating rupee helps only a certain set of IT companies.
My view
but
may not
I
help,
have to involve her as well, because we have to continue this. We have to keep it a little pacey. So Kavita, according to you, the weaknesses, I thought little lesser participation of women in our economy as a whole. Shamika, Ravi mentioned about that. And then the issue of certain job losses, that's really picking up pace in the recent past. You think, I thought those were weaknesses, but how do you see them?
Definitely.
Plus your own list.
Yeah, definitely. The high levels of unemployment is definitely a weakness here. Like Professor Ravi pointed out, educated people who are unemployed are much higher than the uneducated. And in case of women, the situation is even
All right.
worse.
I am very sorry. We have a guest from Davos. Now, when we're discussing economics and economy, we can't not be talking about Davos when WEF is happening there. In fact, we have Invest India's CEO and Managing Director, Deepak Bagla, joining us. Are we going to have him on the screen here? Sakshi, can you help me? I'm told he's skewed. All right, we have him. This is Deepak Bagla, head of Invest India. He has been camping there for us. And are you getting me, Mr. Bagla? This is Abhishek, this side from Pune.
Hi, Abhishek. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm getting you loud and clear.
Davos.
Fantastic to have you. You have been there for about a week. And I believe today is the last day of the World Economic Forum at Davos. And this time we are told that India sent a big contingent. And we were sort of news there. And we created a bit of a splash. Please share with the guests here, the panelists here, the audience here, and of course the viewers of Republic TV. How was India at Davos this time?
Good afternoon. And I just got the last bit of what I was hearing about the economic situation which we were discussing. And I think that was exactly what the topic is here. But let me just start by saying everyone here was saying India is everywhere at Davos. In fact, at the main promenade, if you just walk down that road, every 10 steps, India was present. Either there was a Government of India lounge, a business lounge, and in fact, we had 3 of them. We had one where we had our business roundtables and meetings, more than about close to 24 of those, and all ranging from the discussions on India, which was either PLI, the opportunities in India, the inclusion, and all the other new programs, etc., which India has gone through. And I heard a little about the food program even during the midst of the pandemic. Everyone was discussing that even when the world was going through the most brutal time, and India itself was going through such a pandemic, not only were there focuses which was taking care of the pandemic very effectively, but more importantly, there were also actions being taken. For example, 800 million people getting food grains right through that entire lockdown. And more, very interestingly, there was much discussion on how business reforms continued at that point of time. So there's been a lot of confidence in the global investor community, which is what we are witnessing. And that is what also witnessed the presence and the interest which they've shown in India. Also, every 10 steps I was telling you, we ourselves had another special lounge, which was for sustainability. And everyone again was discussing India's steps and India's political leadership, which has focused on this critical pillar of growth going forward, and how the kind of reforms, and not just the reforms, but impact-oriented reforms, new ones which have been created with the focus on sustainability. There's a very interesting report by JETRO. Abhishek, I don't know how much time do I have. We have 5 minutes.
You please go ahead. Please go ahead. All the time that you have. I know you actually squeezed for time. Go ahead.
I picked up this report here because there was a discussion on a separate session on this one. JETRO, the big Japanese export agency, had surveyed 7,000 corporates in November last year. And in this entire region, which includes Vietnam and our neighbors, India was #1 in steps towards decarbonization. So, we had this separate lounge on sustainability where all these discussions were taking place. We also had one on inclusion, and these are all our government ones, which is what we were showcasing India's strength, which is bottom up, our artisans, our craftsmen, and what India itself is doing towards inclusion. And let me tell you that it used to be completely filled with people at all points of time to see the innovation which is happening on the inclusion side, the circular economy, etc., which was happening. So just to put a little step back and see what was happening. One, I think India probably is the only beacon of hope, and not just the beacon of hope, but it is also that ray of sunlight, as somebody put it very well, in a very dark and gloomy world. There were discussions all around about recession. There was discussions of joblessness. What is the world facing through? And think about it, as everyone said, India is the only large economy which is still growing at 7% plus. The only large economy which moved beyond the COVID effectively, very quickly, and remains the fastest growing large economy on the planet. Let's look at some numbers on this one, Abhishek.
Please do.
For our entire FDI since independence is about close to 950 billion. What we've got in the past 8 years itself is over 530 billion of that. For 8 consecutive years, every year, we've set a new record for FDI. And even in the midst of that lockdown, which we had in 2021-22, you received your highest ever FDI in your history, over 83 billion, over $84 billion. But more interestingly, Abhishek, and I remember mentioning this to you, and this is what has been a major discussion point in Davos, which has given a lot of confidence to the global community, that it has come from over 162 countries. It's a global record.
Right.
And please remember, FDI is not just about that dollar coming in. That FDI is about trust in India's leadership, trust in India's potential, trust in India's future, and most importantly, trust in India's entrepreneurship and trust in India's ability to partner and deliver.
All right.
And let you get the second leg of it, which was again being discussed here. It probably now partners with the world on the largest bouquet of opportunities available. We've got that FDI in 61 countries, and that was another point of discussion which has been happening here, that how effective have these PLI schemes been in getting this FDI? How effective have been ease of doing business efforts of the government? How effective have now been the states which are coming up and getting attention globally? And that brings me to my third leg. And to my mind, the most gratifying one which I have is that today, 31 states and union territories of India have received FDI in the past 8 years. Never before.
Right.
The strength of India, Abhishek, is that there's a new India which is emerging, which everyone is talking about. And this new India is now bottom up. It's not just limited to a few growth engines in a few states.
That's fantastic. I believe those 31 states would include some of those in the Northeast as well. But
absolutely.
My question is, I would be surprised if there in Europe, PLI is not being seen as some kind of subsidy, by the way, Mr. Bagla. But my question is, there is this acknowledgement that India is resilient and India is the island of performance in this global situation that we are seeing, the Europe situation with the war and even China wobbly, for example. Could you give us some sense vis-a-vis China, how was India seen at Davos this time?
So the first bit, which is what I noticed this time in Davos, in India, we're often talking about China plus one. The sense which we get here, it's not just China plus one. It's just India now. It's plus one anywhere. The point that they want to diversify beyond where they are, that is for each and every corporate across the globe, India is now featuring right up there. So it is beyond just China plus one. There is this interest. The other thing which what they're wanting is that look at India's future, 15th August 2047, when we turn 100.
Right.
At that point of time, you'll be 1.6 billion of human resource. 21% of the world's middle class will be in India. Look at that market opportunity. And I think everybody is woken up to it. You've had all global channels talking about how India becomes number one in human resource,
right,
with numbers of human resource in the next 12 months.
Right.
And the other element of it is, don't forget, 20% of the world's skilled workforce will be from India. And that's another big point which is happening. In fact, this was a very interesting roundtable I was at when another senior government official from another country in Europe was mentioning how they are looking at India to help them in their efforts towards skilling. And
right,
not just skilling, but helping them with the requirements which they have. So that is the other element where India's leadership is coming on. But Abhishek, I must tell you, the second very interesting trend which I noticed here this time, the entire trust and faith in India's leadership, in which how well India was steered during the past 36 months, especially during the pandemic. There are now discussions on how India's, and they're looking up to India today to see its involvement in trying to help the world come to solutions which are just not business, but even beyond business.
Right.
And I had in one of the panels, the head of a state from a South American country clearly state that even on the geopolitical side, they're looking at India's leadership today to provide some kind of solutions and bring all these issues which they are facing on geopolitics to some kind of bringing it together to a consensus.
Right.
So there is a new emergence of India's acceptance and acknowledgement in its leadership today. And the kind of investments we are looking at is just a byproduct of that.
All right, so the economic leadership might still be some time away, a few decades away. Are you indicating that there is a sense that India is providing some kind of thought leadership and political leadership perhaps to the global geopolitical situation?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying, and that's what the discussions here are happening. They've already started looking at the steps which India has done, and now they're eagerly looking forward to India to take on to the next steps to bring those solutions. But you were talking on the economic side. I think the acknowledgement, one, that there is a mass which we are talking of. Tell me another country which in 90 months has moved ahead of Russia, Italy, Brazil, France, UK from number 10 to number 5 as a size of a GDP. In the next 12 months, you're knocking at number 4, which is Germany. And what we are looking at ourselves, that even if we continue at the pace where we are looking at anywhere around 35 trillion in the next 9,000 days. So Abhishek, this juggernaut's movement and momentum and velocity is now what has brought the entire world its attention.
All right, Mr. Bagla, there must be some fantastic side stories. Okay, my editor-in-chief, Arnab Goswami, he has a question for you. I could take the mic to him, actually. Mr. Bagla, just hold on. He has a question for you.
Hi, Mr. Bagla. Arnab here. First of all, I just want to say that we feel so proud when we see amazing technocrats like you, lead, the Indian surge and so strongly, so confidently in Davos. I think it gives us great pride. The Republic Dialogue, Mr. Bagla, that we are hosting is in Pune, a city of great culture and entrepreneurship. And these are the growth engines of our economy and our society. And we are doing this Thought Leadership Summit today in Pune because we want to focus on cities beyond just the metros, the traditional metros. So do you have a message for our audience in Pune from where you are today with everyone who matters in the global economy in Davos to the audience here in Pune, which cities like Pune, which are the future of our country's growth engine, which will propel us to that 7 to 8 to maybe double-digit growth in the near future. Mr. Bagla.
You know, Arnab, the two other things which are being discussed here is innovation in a big way and startups. And there was also gender participation. In fact, we at our own lounge had an entire roundtable yesterday on gender participation at senior levels. It was chaired by Minister Mrs. Irani. The hall was packed. And they were amazed at where India in gender participation is. And that takes me to the other point, and this is what, to your point about how they're looking at the new India, which is just beyond the big towns and cities. There was this another panel on startups, and we had our own unicorns which were presenting themselves there. These were fascinating stories of small town young entrepreneurs which have created globally acknowledged unicorns. And let me give you a statistic there. You remember in January 2016, the Honorable Prime Minister launched Startup India. We are a young startup nation. We're just about 72 months away from there. At that point of time, we just had about 450 registered startups. Today, we have 88,000 of those and plus, and everybody is looking at it. But I'll tell you what's more interesting than that. Today, we are number 3 in the world in number of unicorns, number 2 in the world in number of startups, number 1 in the world with new startups starting every day. By the way, I must tell you on the gender point, which I raised, that another interesting point, which was discussed just yesterday, that our women-led startup are growing at over 100% per annum. So you can see how Indian participation on that one, there's a big change. But the other interesting element, today, out of over 775 odd districts in India, I have a registered startup in over 688 of them. The story of New India is now bottom up with each and every citizen. And that is the amazing level, the big discussion here, which everybody is looking at. In fact, there was the investment promotion agencies of 28 countries got together on a roundtable just to study India's digitization program. Digitization has created that democratization of participation in growth, of being able to partake from the benefits of that growth. And everyone was here looking at how fast and impactful it has been created. Just from July 2015, when we were 123 in the world in terms of per capita data consumption, last year, India was number 1. India consumed more per capita mobile data than China and the US put together. 41% of the world's real-time transactions last year happened in India, 41%. We did 48 billion transactions. China was number 2 at 18 billion. And by the way, last year in October, we already touched 8 billion in that month itself. That means we are now at 96 billion run rate of the year. See how fast it is happening. And how everyone is now wanting to follow the Indian digital structure story which we have and wanting to adopt it for themselves. In fact, even we had a G20 panel, which has been working for the investment promotion agencies and including our invitee countries. And the focus now there is how we can help them with the same level of digitization and share with them our success story and help them execute and implement it. You know, each of these pillars are the core pillars of growth. These are the pillars of the future. And we have shown how in a short period of time, with this government's leadership, we've been able to bring these special initiatives completely based on outcomes and how these outcomes have been achieved in such a short period of time. I think this is what everybody is now acknowledging.
All right. So that was quite comprehensive. Thank you so much for that. I know you have to go for another session. Davos is still not over for you. My last question before I let you go, quickly. There would be some fantastic side stories of your 7 days there, of course, dovetailing with the India story. Please share just a couple of them, or even one perhaps, of the soft power of India perhaps that was on display at Davos.
I must tell you, one of our senior ministers just walked out of the lounge and the entire street was mobbed. Everyone was wanting just a photograph for them. The entire traffic was closed. That is the kind of everyone's focus on India today. And I must tell you, those were not just Indians, but people from across the globe just flocking to get a photograph or a selfie and blocking the entire traffic on that street.
All right. And was the Indian chai there at the Davos Square?
Absolutely. The masala tea was the hottest.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Deepak Bagla there, MD and CEO of Invest India, hawking for India, in fact, there at Davos World Economic Forum, joining us live from Davos. Thank you so much. And of course, we'll have a follow-up conversation when you're back.
Looking forward, and you all have fun.
Thank you so much. All right. So this was sort of planned after this session, but I think he had one more engagement, and that's why this ended up happening in between our conversation. But really, it helps, gives some tailwinds to the conversation we are having. We have discussed the strengths and weaknesses. We have to quickly discuss opportunities and threats as well of the Indian economy. And you were, in fact, Professor Patnaik, you were actually going a little in detail on the fiscal situation. I'll go to that. But opportunities, for example, China going down wobbly. They have reported just 3% GDP growth, which is their lowest in the last 40 years. So is that an opportunity for us? For example, Europe in disarray. Does it help us? Of course, we don't want the war to continue, but does it really help us in any manner on the economic front?
Of course, Abhishek. Let me put it in perspective first. Look at China. 10 years back, we're giving example of China. Everybody is giving example of India, which I told in my class that is going to happen 10 years back. Look at the situation now. What happening is now is pandemic Chinese growth was plus 2.2. I repeat, it is plus 2.2, 2020. We had minus 6.6. It was the highest in our history of negative growth.
Right.
Now China is far below than us.
Right.
Whatever policies or whatever,
Right.
that is the reason. Now seeking opportunities, you asked me one question on skill. So I will just take this audience. We have, skill is an important thing, but we never discuss in Indian context the foreign language. I will give an example. The Eurozone growth rate is 0 by the World Bank statistics, 2023. So they have to take their growth rate to some positive level. Similarly, the UK growth rate, UK is fine because English is there, US is fine.
Right.
But many places in Eurozone, you require a local language, Germany, France, and all those things.
Right.
So we, in the education institutions, besides technology, we have to look into this.
All right.
So this opportunity you have to take.
Okay, Kavita, according to you, are opportunities and some threats? So for example, if I look at opportunities, our defense exports are growing. Our engineering capital goods exports are growing. I was looking at this interesting number that till just about a year and a half back, our toy exports were just about 300 crore rupees. That has increased to about 2,600 crore rupees this year. So that's one opportunity where you're looking at manufacturing becoming a strength. Or some threats, private capital. Even Shamika Ravi was mentioning that we are not having as much private investment. We have not had as much private investment over the last decade as we would have wanted to. So according to you, opportunities and threats.
Yeah, so the opportunity arises now from one of our weaknesses, that is our low share of manufacturing in overall GDP. Okay, now that there is so much of focus on increasing manufacturing, you have the PLI schemes which are coming, you have incentives which the government is giving for different sectors. So this is an area of opportunity. And we are just talking about China plus one, right? There's a new terminology which has come into being, minus China. Okay.
Yeah, he mentioned that.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I missed that. So you have minus China. So it is that kind of interest that, companies, overseas companies have in Indian manufacturing capabilities, which they know currently we may not be there, but we will be reaching there given the focus which is there. And it's not just PLI schemes. You have the connectivity issues. You have your Gati Shakti, which is there. You have your national logistics policy.
Yes.
All of these which are over over time, or it will be not too far in the future, wherein all these will become very cost effective, okay, and it will help build on our global competitiveness.
Right.
That, to my mind, is a big opportunity which is there, okay. Now, in terms of threats, again, if we want to engage more with the global economy, it is again the health of the global economy which would have implications for us. So a situation of prolonged slowdown in the global economy could derail this plan of being the factory of the world or the office of the world.
We are already seeing this in terms of the export numbers that are coming, for example. The global situation becoming a sort of a threat. We have...
want to add here, though. You just mentioned about the toy exports, right? How did that come about? Okay, government came up with policies which limited the imports of toys. They raised the basic customs duty on toys, and at the same time, they helped promote exports. So these kind of policies are required across, industries, across sectors. Of course, this goes against the doctrine of free trade. But if you look back in history, all these countries which are developed today, when they were not developed, okay, they had aggressive industrial policies, wherein they had all these protectionist features there,
right.
high tariffs and everything. So, probably we need to go down that route also.
All right. So I have to sort of bring this conversation to an end. Professor Patnaik, since you were mentioning fiscal, I thought we would have had a little longer conversation on that, but Mr. S. Gurumurthy is here. And as they say, very welcome, sir. As they say, economic survey is about hardcore economics, but the budget is about political economy. We have been discussing hardcore economics. Mr. Gurumurthy would be giving us an idea of the political economy. Last quick word from you. There is a good fiscal deficit and there is a bad fiscal deficit. The good one, of course, crowds in investment and spurs growth. And then there is the bad fiscal deficit about which everyone talks. Quickly, according to you, at 6.4% for the central government, 3+ for the states, taken together about 10%, are we looking good on the fiscal front as we head into the budget cycle? So,
certainly not by one word. We are far beyond the FRBM target for quite some years. Compulsions are there.
Maybe because of the pandemic.
Pandemic was the latest cause of that. And fiscal deficit is fiscal deficit. There is no good, there is no bad. Right. Because borrowing beyond your means is bad. That we have taken that stance because we say capital expenditure of the government is good, revenue expenditure is bad. So that is how this concept has been popularized.
Right.
But borrowing is bad.
Right.
Borrowing is bad for two senses.
Right.
With the two points I will raise. One is it creates vicious cycle of deficit and debt.
Yes.
Whether you borrow for capital expenditure or borrow for revenue expenditure, you create the vicious cycle. Interest payment is there.
Right.
And also we take a comfort, particularly at the policy side, policymaker side. Look, we have satisfied the Dober condition. Our rate of growth is higher than the rate of interest.
Right.
That is what that is. But our primary deficit is much above if you expand the literature. So that is fiscal deficit minus interest payment. So fiscal sustainability is not there. Not only in India, it's a world phenomenon.
Right.
Everywhere that fiscal deficit is there.
Right.
That is how pandemic we front-loaded the monetary policy.
Right.
And that also created a fiscal problem.
Right.
In financing the fiscal deficit.
Right.
So not necessarily fiscal deficit is good or bad. It is fiscal deficit is bad, and whatever you do, you have to reduce fiscal deficit,
right.
Provided, as I started,
right.
You have to make revenue deficit zero.
All right.
Then the fiscal deficit could be good.
All right. So this was the academic view, sir, that any kind of fiscal deficit is bad. So on that note, I think this is a good point to end so that, Mr. Gurumurthy can take it forward from there, whether some fiscal deficit is good for growth, it spurs growth. And on that note, thank you so much, Professor Patnaik, Kavita Chacko, and I hand it over to Suesha, and he takes it forward.
Thank you so much to you all once again. Ms. Kavita Chako, Mr. Patnaik, and Abhishek Kapoor for that enlightening session. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, as it has been a very, very enriching morning leading into this afternoon. Time now for the most awaited finale session. Joining us, like you've been told, is Mr. Gurumurthy. He is the editor of the Tamil magazine Tughlaq, chairman of the respected strategic think tank Vivekanand International Foundation, Delhi, board member of the Reserve Bank of India, and a journalist whose probity was praised world over, including by the likes of Australian writer Hamish MacDonald. He is also a well-known advisor to many corporates on law and finance and on macroeconomic issues. As a professional, he has mediated and solved some of the most complex corporate issues. Today, he's joined us to shed light on India's position in a changing global order. Mr. Gurumurthy will be sharing his insights on the Indian trajectory and the G20 opportunity, the key values and ideas India must hold on to become a global leader. A chartered accountant, a key economic strategist, and a thought leader, Mr. Gurumurthy's erudite perspective is widely awaited. A huge round of applause as we welcome Mr. Gurumurthy on stage as a part of this finale session. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Namaskarams to all. I do not know what transpired from the morning till now. I had a few words exchanged with Arnab. I know it must have been a very focused and a very highly specialized sessions. But I will be talking from a silo-free, a kind of a helicopter presentation. Somebody sent me a video yesterday about a video of Bertrand Russell's discussion with someone. And Bertrand Russell said, what changes have taken place since I began knowing about the world and today? It is phenomenal, unbelievable the world would have changed in such a short time as my life. But applying it to what has transpired in the last 1 year, I don't think the world would have ever, anybody, the best brains, the most intricate think tanks could have visualized what happened in the world after the Ukraine war. Any time before that, the world has completely changed. In fact, there is no rule which was applicable before the Ukraine war is capable of being applied after the Ukraine war. This is the kind of change that has taken place. In fact, the whole thrust of globalization, the world as one little village, these are all completely outdated today. We have to find a new way of working the world. It is in this background I will be presenting where India was maybe 10 years back and where India is today and where the world is today and the world will be, say, in the next 10 years and where India will stand in that world. The changes are tectonic. And the post-war geopolitical world order, from being a world led by a hegemonic power, has become a world of diffused powers. Today, there is no hegemonic power. In fact, it is much worse than the Cold War rivalry, where there were two blocks trying to control the world or being competitive about one another. But today, this is a kind of I wouldn't call it anarchic, But the world is so diverse today in terms of power shared economically, politically, and culturally, and in terms of demography, that the world order which was formulated after the Second World War, which was reformulated after the Cold War, is not under severe threat as many people say. It is not just under a challenge. It has been deformed. Henry Kissinger said that the world order will be restructured permanently. Who is going to restructure it? There is not one axiomatic power or brain or institution which can rearticulate the world today. In fact, George Soros is perhaps very near what can be the true position. He said there is likely to be a civilizational collapse of the West. This is the most appropriate understanding of the world because the world was run by the Western way of doing things. In fact, many people, whenever I have quoted in IIT or IIM or many research institutions, they were not even aware the philosophic and ideological drive for the world that was articulated by none less than the United Nations in the year 1951. I think in the last Republic session I quoted it, but I think it is worth quoting it again because these are not things which are a current in the public discourse. So I would like to start the session with how the United Nations constituted an expert committee in 1949 and came out with a report in 1951, which of course had some kind of a representative from India also who belonged to Pune. And they submitted a report in which the core idea is what I am going to quote from what they say. There is a sense in which rapid economic progress is impossible without painful adjustments. Ancient philosophies have to be scrapped. Old social institutions have to disintegrate. Bonds of caste, creed, and race have to burst. And large number of persons who cannot keep up with progress have to have their expectations of comfortable life frustrated. Very few communities are willing to pay the full price for economic progress. This is the extension of the Western anthropology of modernity. Modernity, which we are thinking as something which is progressive about, world always keeps changing. The contemporary world would never be the same as it was 100 years back, but modernity has another orientation that unless the world is characterized in terms of the Western civilization, Western way of life, and Western food habits, and Western etc., it is not modern. There cannot be a Tamil-speaking modern Indian. There cannot be Hindi-speaking modern Indian. There cannot be a person wearing tikka who is a modern Indian. Because modern Indian has a definition. This is how the world was turned into a one-size-fit-all model. Not only in terms of the intellectual orientation, but also in terms of psychological, physical orientation, cultural orientation, and sensitivities, how to eat, how not to eat. The whole way of shaping the world in a particular manner, this was devised. And that is precisely what was not only recommended in 1951, it was accepted in 1990s as the post-Cold War world order. Everybody accepted in the name of globalization. And we began propagating it in a big way. And now what is happening is these tectonic changes have challenged this formulation. In fact, the very idea of modernity has undergone a change in the last 7-8 years in the Western academia. There is nothing called one source of modernity. Every civilization has a way of renewing itself. Modernity is an evolution which takes place within each civilization, and there is no one dominant civilization which shows the way to modernity. This is now an accepted position. Professor Hunt, who did the greatest research in this has said that every nation, every civilization has a way of modernizing itself in the sense in which they are able to say this will not suit the future. And this is not the discourse in India, because the Indian discourse is still not original. Of course, we have been able to discard this Asiatic model, which was being suggested as a sign of India cannot become a modern society at all. This is how we were put in the category of people who can never modernize ourselves. This is based on this is based on Karl Marx and Max Weber's formulation that a society which follows Hinduism and Buddhism cannot modernize itself and cannot become a successful economy. This was the model that was suggested for our public discourse, for our academia, for our media, for our government. This is a big story which I partly told in my previous session. Now, from there, what is the change that is taking place? Change from a world of one monetary and financial order and one money into a world of multiple monetary orders, multiple finances, and multiple monies. This is something unthinkable. This could not have been imagined 5 years back. And it is now becoming a reality. You know, Japan and China Japan and China are almost like undeclared enemies. But they have come to an understanding that for $300 billion, they will have non-dollar transaction in mutual national currencies. This is not even known outside. You have to Google and get this information. So this one money driving the world is also being departed from. And challenges from autocracies to liberal democracies. You know, in 1990, when globalization came, the West proclaimed that liberal democracy and free market have won the game once and for all, and is the best for the rest to follow the Western liberal democracy and free market economy. This was an open declaration. The entire post-Cold War order, institutions, finance, everything was founded on that basis. Now that is being challenged. Not because of anything, because in the international monetary, financial, and trade order, in which democratic rules operated, transparency operated, for its own selfish purposes, America brought in China, which was non-transparent, has nothing to do with the democracy. They all said we will co-opt. In fact, Clinton went to the extent of saying that when we co-opt China into the world economy, it will not only that we will be exporting our goods, we will all be exporting our ideas, virtually saying China will democratize. That was the base on which China was brought in. Today, China is the biggest autocratic challenge. Making use of the transparent rules through their non-transparent statecraft. A Marxist economy cannot operate in a market economy. So there is a challenge from the Marxist market economy to the free market economy. These are all the challenges which are coming today, for which within the Western formulation, rules, regulations, institutions, there is no answer. It is in this background, India is assuming the leadership of G20. See, G20 was a formulation which was found necessary because G7 and G8 were unable to handle the enlarging dimensions of the world finance, world issues. In fact, terrorism was one of the reasons why G20 acquired a very important place, because these transactions, monetary and financial banking transactions, needed to become apparent if the world were to live in peace, because wrong money and terror have got together. And actually, G20 acquired its prominence only after 2008, particularly after 2015. And now it has a certain role to play. Otherwise, it was only a debating club. Today it has a value, and we have now become the President of India, and the Prime Minister Modi is now the President of G20. The Prime Minister made two propositions. We have to test whether these two propositions are just slogans or have they any meaning. Is India legitimate in suggesting it? Has it the moral and legitimate power to make these two propositions? One is, he talked about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam as a philosophy for the world. It would look that he is recalling some 5,000 years of civilizational value for the contemporary and future world. But I will explain to you how relevant it is. And it is in terms of figures. It is in terms of the current and future world. So, because we have not understood our way of working, we have not understood our philosophy, we have not understood our lifestyle, we are not able to understand what the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is. So that will be one of the major portions I will be explaining to you today. Second is, he came to a more practical subject, high debt free and environmentally comforting development model. You see, these are all very freely spoken. Anybody can speak about it. In fact, environment is now the discourse of the West, which is doing the greatest damage to environment for not today, for the last 50, 60 years. If you look at the contribution that the West has made to damage the environment, the total greenhouse gas emission till today, if it is turned into percentages and saddled on the countries which have contributed the maximum, till now, all the greenhouse gases taken together, aggregated together, 25% of the contribution has come from America. Till now, in the history. European Union, 22%. China, 13%. India, 3%. With how much population? 18% of world's population. Russia, 6%. This small little Ukraine, 1.2%. See the amount of damage these guys have done to the world, and they are the ones who have now got on to the environment paradigm and telling us what we should do. And I'm going to tell you what we have to say and what we do not know what to say because of the inadequacy of Indian intellectualism, Indian understanding about itself, because India is one subject about which India was never told in our academia, in our government discourse, in the public discourse. I am going to tell you this. So are these empty slogans? No. You know, in India, many people, the West, there is say, you precept and practice. What you say, you must practice. But our philosophy is different. Swadhyaya pravachana. This is what the Vedas say. You must practice and then only speak. It's a completely different thing. Unless you practice, you cannot speak. The entire geopolitics today is based on whether you practice or not, you should speak well. The articulation, the capacity, the institutional arrangement, the media power that you have, all that has put practice irrelevant, precept more relevant, because the people who are speaking are more capable, more articulate, more powerful. We are not that. We actually practice. How do we practice? This is what I want to tell you. India practices Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. First point. This Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is integrated in two aspects. One is environmental culture and two, cultural economics. I am going to emphasize this because these are not things which, you speak through flowery words. No. You have to support it by hard facts. Now I will take you to the whole idea of environment, because this is the most important paradigm the world is now holding in its hand to keep the rest under check. The rest does not know, including China. I don't see there is any Asian narrative of environment. So how important it is for us to develop our own narrative based on facts, narrative based on undisputed facts. What I am mentioning to you is facts gathered from ourworlddata.com, which is an important, all the Western universities, including Harvard University are members of this. This is undisputed facts I am mentioning to you. If you look at the world, nature has arranged the world in such a manner. 71% of the world is water, 21% is land. You know, in the body also, 71% of your body composition consists of liquid. There is an alignment between the microcosm and the macrocosm. It's all, nature has arranged it in such a manner, any disturbance anywhere will ultimately hurt the man, because nature is very reactive. It's punishing and it cannot excuse you. So in this, of the 29% land, the habitable land is about 20% and of the habitable land, 10% is agricultural land. And of the 10% agricultural land, 8% is used for livestock farming and 2.4% used for crop farming. You understand what it is? In such a huge world, only 2.4% is used for crop farming, 8% is used for cattle farming. Now you come to calories. 83% of the calories come from crop farming, for which you are devoting only 2.4% of the land area. And only 17% of the calories come from the area 8% devoted for cattle farming. And take protein. 63% of the protein comes from 2.4% area devoted for crop farming. And 37% comes from the cattle farming. Now, you come to India. You know, we have just 2% of world's land area. We have 18% of world's population. We have 30% of world's cattle population. We have 8% of world's bioresources. And 33% of, 1/3 of these bioresources are found nowhere in the world. And repeatedly, India has been given awards by different global bodies for its capacity to preserve the bioresources. How is it that 18% population on a 2% land area with 30% of the global cattle population is able to feed itself? This is a question which every Indian university, thinking institutions, government bodies, media is supposed to ask. I'll tell you how. If you look at the per capita land available, in the world it is 0.63 hectare per head. It is 1.27 in America, 0.43 in China, 0.13 in India. We have only 0.13 hectare agricultural land per capita available. Then how are we managing? It is because of our food style. It is our food style which enables us not only to feed ourselves and keep us in comfort, we are also in a position to supply food to the world. How? It's not a statistical jugglery. There is a science of taking food. You go to Kerala, they have a science of having food. In Tamil Nadu, there is a science of food. Anywhere you go, there is a science. Food is taken on the basis of the traditional culinary formula. So, if there is ourworldindia.com has worked out a beautiful formulation. Let us assume if the whole world shifts to the American way of taking food. From tomorrow onwards, all Indians, all Chinese, all Asians shift to American way of taking food. Ourworldindia.com says we will need 140% of the agricultural land the world has today. We will need 40% more land than the world has today if everybody were to shift to American way of eating food. You come to India. If the whole world takes to the Indian way of taking food, we will need only, you will not believe, we will need only 40% of the agricultural land we are using for agriculture. This is not my data. This is our world in data.com, which is an undisputed source of information. But tell me, which Indian university, which Indian think tank, which Indian IIT, which Indian government formulated papers bring out this fact? The only thing is, we also eat meat. You know, majority of the Indians eat meat. They say it is as much as 60-65%. There are variations in estimate, but it is somewhere 1/3 of the Indians are not meat eaters. 2/3 of the Indians are meat eaters. But meat is not our main food. Meat is our sabji. Our main food is cereal. It is the reverse in the West, with the result, our per capita meat consumption today is 3.1 kg per head. It is 109 kg per head in America. It is 84 kg per head in European Union. Most environmentally damaging eating habit. The most environmentally compatible food habit we have. Don't you think you must pass laws to preserve your food habits? You must have a huge campaign to preserve it. Dosa, idli, vada, paratha. These are all going to save you. But if you bring in more the McDonald's and burgers, it is not only you will be damaged, the world will be damaged. So when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, it is not that we are comfortable with each other, we are comfortable with every living creation in the world. Otherwise you cannot have, you know what is the cattle population of India? 300 million. It is 257 million in Brazil, 95 million in China, 94 million in America, 89 million in European Union. See how we are taking care of cattle 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the number. How? It is not that cattle is just an edible proposition. It is our friend. It's part of agriculture. It's part of homes. It's worshipped. Do we understand? Otherwise, why should we keep 300 million cattle? And livestock is 500 million. These are the implications of the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. I come from a village. In fact, I have a feeling, unless you come from a village, you cannot understand India. I'm sorry I am making a very judgmental statement, because this is how I have come across whenever I have dealt with Indian intellectuals who are very proficient in English. They have a very sad and bad idea about a village. I think that is where you understand the value of life. For example, in our village, you can't cut a tree. If somebody is pregnant in that village, you have to go and take the permission of the pregnant woman's family to cut the tree. We built a house in Chennai. In fact, any of you can come to my house and see. It is almost in the center of the house. There was a neem tree. We decided we cannot cut the tree. We gave up almost 2,000 square feet of constructed area for the tree to survive. And it is being worshipped in our house. These are not things which you can cultivate by education. This you cannot cultivate by mere giving lectures or reading books. This is part of the Indian DNA. This is what is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. When the Prime Minister spoke about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, he didn't speak about what was stated in our Vedas or Upanishads, but it is a functioning reality. So, this is the first point. And if, let us assume one more point I would like to mention, if all Indians shift to the American way of eating, we will need 6 times the agricultural land we have today. Not only that, the land that will be needed will be 2.5 times the size of India itself. You understand how important it is to preserve our food habits? In the interest of your own survival, in the interest of, if all Indians, 1.4 billion Indians, begin eating meat in the way the Americans do, there will be no world. It will be over. But do we understand that? Our meat consumption, which was 5.2 kilos per head, has come down to 3.1. There is a 30% reduction. Did anyone campaign for that? People are feeling that you must touch meat and you should not eat meat. So if you have a desire for meat, you eat. But you don't substitute it for other things. Sabji is the way, vegetables are there, your cereals are there. You know the number of cereal varieties in India, the rice varieties in India, at one point in time, 100,000. Today you have 22,000 varieties of rice preserved in India. The cereal varieties in India are almost 200,000. In the entire West, the cereal varieties put together is not more than 200. Because diversity is there only in the non-Western part of the world. You know, if I remember right, in Chile, I think it is Chile, you know, they began importing the Western food. And they had a protein-rich food called, cereal called amaranth. So everybody began eating the Western barley, wheat and things like that, and they gave up amaranth. They found they were becoming dependent, like Kerala. Kerala imports 90% of its food from outside. It was a self-sufficient economy. Communists came and destroyed the agriculture. With the result, they have begun importing food. This happened to Chile. Then what happened? They had to take a campaign to bring back amaranth eating habits through the media, through cinema stars, through prime ministers. Food habits are very important. Now I will come to the second thing, living habits. The way we live. You know, in America, in the year 1960, in every house, 3.31 persons were residing. The average number of persons residing in a house was 3.31. Today, it is 2.51. In the last 60 years, this change has taken place. They had to construct 31 million more houses because of that. The amount of environmental damage is incalculable. If 3.3 persons were present in the house, now it is 2.51, the environmental damage that has been calculated is enormous. 8.5 trillion is the investment they had to make to build these 31 million houses. Now come to India. We have 4.9 persons per household today. It was 5.2 in 1951, not much change. In fact, in urban areas, more people reside in the same house than even in rural areas, because in rural areas, you have enough space to build houses. Not only that, India is probably one of the most highest home-owning population in the world. 85% of the people have houses. It may be a small house, it may be some thatched roof or whatever it is, they have their own house. It is only in urban areas the housing is less. In rural areas, it's almost complete. Now, if 4.9 per head comes down by 1 to 3.9, we will be needing 51 million more houses. If we come to the American standard of just through 2.51, we will be needing 130 million more houses. Our way of adjusting families, living together, we have problems, we have difficulties. But you know how much it contributes to environment, economy, and unburdens the state, unburdens the world. take India, it is 1/6 of humanity. If India doesn't develop, what is the problem of the world? If India and China do not develop, there will be no world. So, you need, as a country, you have to have your own style, you have to have your own model. You cannot have the human rights values of America of creating fight between father and son, brother and sister, daughter and husband and wife, and still maintain 4.9 persons per family. There is a clash between human rights and cultural values. The United Nations did not have the word diversity in its dictionary at all till 1994, when it first enacted Biodiversity Convention. 1946 it was born. In 1991 only the United Nations first came to know of some idea called diversity, because they said all the world philosophies have to be scrapped, you all have to change, you all have to become like me. Where is the diversity? You wanted the whole world homogenized on the style of what you thought would be the world. Now, biodiversity was the first diversity the United Nations discovered in 1994. Because huge destruction, like 30% of rainforests were destroyed since 1900. Then 2001 they woke up. Just like biodiversity, there is also cultural diversity. So they had the Cultural Diversity Convention in the year 2001, in which they said, if there is a clash between cultural diversity and human rights will prevail. It should be the other way. If there is a clash between family values and human rights, family values is cultural, social values is cultural, economic values is cultural. Otherwise, why should I take care of my parent? Why should I educate my brother? Why should I educate my sister? Why? Because we are a relation-based society. We are not a contract-based society. We are not living together by contract. We have not agreed to live together. We live together because we like living together. There are problems, difficulties. And I would give the entire credit for this kind of arrangement, living arrangement, only to the women of India. They bore the burden. They bear the difficulties. They do the savings. They do the expenditure. In fact, in 2002, I delivered a lecture in America, in San Jose, which is available in Google. You can Google and get it. Where I said, Indian economy is feminine in character. We never waste anything. We turn waste into wealth. If you see in America, they turn wealth into waste. You see the way good cars are flattened in America. You know how to use the 5th generation. The car changes 10 hands and still it is used. We turn waste into wealth, whether in form a plastic bag or a car or a cycle or a chair. Reuse. This has become a new environmental value, which is in our DNA. So, our living style itself is a very important contributory to the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Because you cannot, if you don't know how to live in a family, you don't know how to live as a nation, and you cannot certainly live as a global family. The idea of family is integrated value, the difficulties in living together. All this requires a cultural orientation, shaping up of mind, and subordination of the individual for a larger purpose. In Mahabharata, there is a sloka. Tyajat yegam kulasyarte, gramarte kulam tejet, gramam janapadasyarte, atmarte prithvim tejet. This is the fundamental basis of Indian politico-economy. For the welfare of the family, the individual yields his rights. For the welfare of the village, a family yields its rights. For the welfare of the nation, the village yields its rights. For a person who doesn't want any of these things, for him nothing matters, because Atmarte Prithivintejidi, he has gone above the worldly requirements, and only that man is free from these obligations. Only a person who doesn't want anything from the world is free from the obligations of the family, of the society, of the nation. Now, the contemporary individualist thinkers of the West, they want everything in the world, but they don't want to do anything to even to the family. With the result, today, the liberal democracies are suffering from such erosion in strength. Only 45% of the youths vote. Only 40% of the youths take interest in politics. It gives them all the rights to enjoy, but they don't want to return that right even by voting. Liberalism has not produced responsibility. It has not been able to create people who will stand by liberalism. They want to enjoy liberalism. They don't want to contribute to liberalism. But in India, it's entirely different. You know, in the West, if you see, it is the educated people vote. It is the people who have higher income vote. It is the higher strata of the people vote. The lower strata, minorities, uneducated people, they vote less. In India, it is the reverse. 75% of the minorities vote. 65% of the scheduled caste vote. 64% of the backward classes vote. It is 49% of the educated people vote. 45% of the forward caste vote. The Indian democracy's bottom strength is very heavy. You know, this research has been done by a person, Yogendra Yadav. So he can never go back upon it. So there is something very different about India. This manifests in social security. We take care of our parents. We take care of the family obligations. We educate our children. But this is not what is happening in the West. All the responsibilities are transferred to the government. Families have been nationalized. The children are not being educated by the parents. With the result, the unprovided for unfunded social obligations of the West is $62 trillion, against which the government doesn't have even $1 on hand. It is the current value of the future social security obligations. So when I say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, shared living, adjusting, family, community, nation, when Modi speaks about it, he speaks from the perspective of environmental culture and cultural economics. There is an integration between all the three concepts. Then he spoke about development with less debt. I'll tell you what is the debt figures of different nations, whether India can talk about it. You take the indebted nations. If you take the government debt in 2008 and 2021, the American public debt, the government debt has doubled from 65% of the GDP to 128% of the GDP. In UK, 43% to 104%. European Union, 66 to 98%. Japan, 172 to 262%. In China, 29 to 72%. In India, 66 to 85%. We have borne one of the biggest public welfare programs during the pandemic. It's not a small nation. Still, our debt is only 85% of the GDP. And our private debt is even less. In China, the private debt is, in 2008, 106% of the GDP. Now it is 197%. In India, 47% to 57% was the improvement in this period, 2008 to 2021. Our people don't borrow unnecessarily. So, when the Prime Minister said we should have growth, we should have development, we should have globalization with less debt, he has had the legitimacy to talk about it. There is a performance. So, whether in terms of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, whether in terms of environmental culture or cultural economics, I think India has a functioning model to show to the world. This G20 is an opportunity for India to pack its ideas and present to the world. Here is an alternative model, functioning model. It is not a theoretical model. It is not something which we have brought from libraries. It is working on the ground. So this opportunity has come to India. But the Prime Minister is aware. The Prime Minister knows. But how many people in the country know? I don't know. How many academic institutions can present an alternative thought to the Western academic institutions? I do not know. How many in the media can present an alternative living model to the world? I don't know. In fact, we are swallowing and vomiting their own idea of human rights without knowing how much it damages your own family, your own community, your own nation. You know, human rights is now available only for anarchists. The court is concerned with the human rights of terrorists. It is concerned with the human rights of Naxalites. This perversion, which can damage not only the security of the country, but the economy of the country, environment. Do we present it that way? You have to have a human face, an environmental face, a community face, an economic face to the concept of human rights. Human rights cannot stand alone. It has to work with other dimensions of life. This is not the way we think. We just vomit, we just swallow and vomit. Whatever the Western think tanks say, we quote them. I mean, 1/6 of humanity cannot become the carbon copy of 1/16 of humanity. We need very original thinkers, courageous thinkers, who are willing to take the blame for saying the truth and an alternative to what is being assumed as truth, which is not the truth. So we need because India is no more a pushover. You know, India's position today in the world is highly legitimate. India's rise is legitimate. I will just give what are the internal drives to India's legitimate. Any country can rise. For instance, Hitler also rose. It was not a legitimate rise. Now Xi Jinping is rising. It is not a legitimate rise. It's a problem. It's a difficulty. Now, if you look at India's rise in the past 7-8 years, strong government from 1989 to 2014, we had rickety coalitions. Nobody bothered about it. It was in that period China rose. The West did not look at India because it did not have a government. You had 1.5 years government, 1 year government, half-year government. We have a stable government, strong government. Scam-free rule, leak-free government schemes, digital governance, ease of doing business, rise of organized financing and banking. Nowhere in the world you could see a government opening bank accounts for 420 million people, of which 390 million bank accounts are operational with funds in a matter of 6 years. It has never happened in the world. Then, clearance of historical baggages, Article 370, Ram Janmabhoomi, we were saddled with this for 6 decades, 7 decades. Settling the past is a very, these are all the things which the West sees. No country will be respectable unless it keeps its house in order. We have been able to do it only in the past 6-7 years. We have never been able to do it in the past. We always saw Kashmir as a problem. Today we are seeing Kashmir as a model. How to develop Kashmir. Today, you must have read about in the newspapers how Kashmir tourism has jumped. A total change of picture. There is no gun-trotting terrorists. They have all been eliminated. And they will continue to be eliminated. And Pakistan, which was always threatening India, it has come out with a statement. We have learned the lesson from three wars we had with India. Do we expect this to happen 10 years back? In fact, one Pakistani writer wrote, Pakistan has been reduced to a footprint in Southeast Asia, and if it does not correct itself, it will be reduced to a footprint in history. It is no more. We are not hyphenated with Pakistan. We are matching China, whether it is Doklam, whether it is Ladakh, or it is Arunachal. There is no question that you may have economic might, you may have military might, but on the border you cannot win. India has ensured that in a border fight, there will be no victor on this side or that side. If China attacks, it has to attack beyond the borders, in which case it will not be a war between only two countries. In fact, the question came, I heard it on the highest authority. In 2020, China did say the war may not be limited to the borders. You know what was her response? You mean to say you will attack Bombay? I will ensure you there will be no Shanghai. This is the India we are seeing today. An India which doesn't, which will mind others threatening. It will answer. This is not the India we have seen. So, a phenomenal growth of physical and digital infra, firm action against anarchy and terror. We were haunted by terror. Today, a PFI is snuffed out. Just like that. There is not even a whim for a protest. And defense preparedness. Rise of globally accepted national leadership. For 3 years consecutively, the Morning Consult has been rating Modi as the tallest leader of the world. And all other democratic leaders 10 points, 12 points, 15 points below. This is not our assessment. It is their assessment. And victory in the war against COVID. This Swadeshi vaccine, you know, we were beggars of vaccine. Any disease which came from outside, we have to go and beg for vaccine. They will give us 2 years, 3 years later. We made the vaccine, effective vaccine, which has prevented the disease from growing. We are almost free. I mean, today I was seeing our COVID numbers is less than 100. But do we talk about it? The West knows it. They see the rise of India legitimate. You are no more dependent on somebody developing in their laboratories and you are going and begging, please give me. You are exporting. You have given vaccine to 100 countries in the world. Now, the external thing. I told you about handling of neighbors. Terror, Uri and Balakot. Afterwards, there was no cross-border terror of a magnitude India had to fear about. And then I told you about Ladakh. And amid COVID time, Jaishankar, who had come for the Tughlaq function, he told me, he told the audience, when the Chinese thought if they attacked India at the time when COVID was raging in India, India will not be able to repulse the attack. We gave them back. It was shocking for China. It's a different India. And India has a global pharmacy, now handling geopolitics. We have the traditional ally in Russia. We have the strategic ally in US. US can't give us up. You know why? The liberal democracy in India or in the world is only 13% of world's population. More than half the world is under autocracy. If we don't stand with the liberal democracies, there will be no liberal democracy in the world. These guys were rating Indian democracy. It's not liberal. Now they say, come on, you are part of us. Why? We are not a liberal democracy. We will not be a liberal democracy. We should not be a liberal democracy. We are a civilizational democracy. We recognize all the constituents of there are caste-based parties, there are religion-based parties, there are language-based parties. These are all completely anti-liberalism. But we recognize all that. We have a functioning democracy. We are able to tick together, work together, speak together, travel together, grow together. It's not a joke. Nowhere in the world, you know, when France was formed, when Italy was formed, less than 2% of these people spoke French language. Less than 1% of these people spoke Italian language. They were all constructed as state by the might of the king. India evolved because of its civilizational model. Mahatma Gandhi mentions it in Hind Swaraj. You must all read. The man who understood India, he told the British how India remains one. It remains one because of its civilizational values. People travel from one end of the country to the other. M.J. Akbar wrote, the greatest unifier of India was Adi Shankara. Do we understand all this? This cannot happen by army. It cannot be happen by state power. It's an evolution. That's why every time the West thought India would collapse, it never obliged them. It's now rising. It has shaken the West. Now, special relations will anyone with Modi, BJP, Hindutva, RSS, all the campaign, Middle Eastern countries are our closest allies. Then Pakistan being reduced to footprint in history. Emergence as a regional leader. Today, nobody can challenge us in the region. I am not going to Upper Asia. I am talking about down. Then civilizational and strategic ties with Israel. I mean, we have ties with every one of consequence in the world. We have special ties with France, which is vetoing any attempt of the European Union against India. See the geopolitical strategies we have made. So, on the Ukraine stand, the world was shaken, Western world, by the stand that Modi took. Because it has a history. The West kept on expanding the NATO. Russia begged. He said, we will join the NATO. Please don't expand the NATO. We are willing to join the European Union. These were all the appeals that Russia was making. Yeltsin and all these people went, don't expand. The Cold War is over. The Americans thought they had won, and it is their responsibility and the duty and the obligation to rule the world. It was, in fact, Henry Kissinger, who knew about geopolitics more than anyone else in the world, advised the Americans not to go for NATO expansion, not to go for grabbing Ukraine. But some joint secretary wrote a note, this is an opportunity for us to rule the world. A joint secretary in America wrote a note that was accepted, and that landed in America in a mess, the world in a mess. We knew the background of the Ukraine war. And so we said in Ukraine war, you cannot say it is unjust. We are not going to say it is just or unjust. With the result, we have been able to manage our energy crisis so well. We have been able to reframe the energy economy of the world. If India had not taken that position, I don't think Middle East countries would have been able to stand up to America. You must understand how it is like an echo. So, India is at the center of geopolitics today. India, as the largest and the powerful country in terms of geography, in terms of technology, in terms of every other thing which the world values today, we are now a very important factor. India as the only democratic alternative to the world. If India is not there with the democratic countries, I can tell you democratic countries will be reduced to mere islands in the world. You may have ICBM atom bombs. What will you do? Your geopolitical reach, influence will not be there. You need India. So my feeling is that our time has come. In fact, I only remember what Ratan Tata said. I will close with that. He said, my only regret is I am not 20 years younger, because I think that India is going through a very exciting period in its history. I also feel I am 74. I don't know whether I will be able to see that India for which you all worked for 50 years, the India of our dream. Many of you will be able to see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gurumurthy, for that wonderful and thought-provoking keynote address. Absolutely everyone thinking over all that you have said. There's so many areas of thought that you've shared with us on Vasudev Kutumbakam, of how you've spoken about how very many ape and want to ape the West, but actually it is really about diving deep into the Indian ethos for a growing India. and how the G20 is a very promising model and creates that opportunity to present our ideas to the globe. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not it. If you think this conversation goes further, in fact, let me invite on stage Republic Media Network Editor-in-Chief Arnab Goswami, who will engage in a fireside chat with Mr. Gurumurthy. Both of you men on the stage, like to welcome you. A huge round of applause, please.
Mr. Gurumurthy, I think on behalf of everyone in the audience and everyone watching on television, on the Republic Media Network, online, across the world, let me just say that we are already we have besieged by a swathe of reactions to what you've been saying, because it is not just people in this hall, it is a lot of people across the country and around the world who've been mesmerized by what you've said in the last half an hour. So first of all, I think we are very grateful to you for that, and I thank you for it, sir. And I also want to say how privileged I am to be in the presence of an intellectual giant like you, and how privileged we are as a country. Mr. Gurumurthy, you said that you are 74, and you don't know whether you will see the future that you have worked for and sacrificed a lot for. And by way of introduction, let me tell the audience here today, we are in the presence of a man who for half a century has gone through the most difficult hardships, taken on the most inconvenient of situations on himself. A man who's been facing court cases, fought for corporate governance, fought corporates in this country, gone to jail for it, fought political establishments. So when Mr. Gurumurthy comes on stage and talks about what he feels about the country and why he speaks so passionately, it is because 2/3 of his 74 years has been fighting for the India that we are proud to be looking forward to. So we are grateful to you, sir. Not just for your wisdom, but we are grateful for what you've done to this country. And I thank you for it. Sir, since we are in your presence, I will ask some straightforward questions. I won't go academic, I'll go straight. My first question to you is on Prime Minister Modi. Mr. Gurumurthy, when Prime Minister Modi took office, and when the results of the elections came on the 16th of May, 2014, and I think he was sworn in around the 23rd, 24th, 25th of May, 2014, what I call the Lutyens media, they put out this narrative that he's a very good politician, a great mass leader, but he does not have an academic knowledge of economics. He does not have a domain expertise of foreign policy. So they were looking at identifying foreign policy and economics as his weakness. And they felt that the Prime Minister needs an education on this. Now when we look upon it 8 years later, 9 years later, we feel, and my view is clear, that I think the Prime Minister has educated a lot of people on economics and foreign policy. And what is happening at Davos today wouldn't be happening without his application of mine. My first question, therefore, to you, sir, is, how do you read Prime Minister's understanding of economics, whether Jan Dhan Yojana, taking a tough, unpopular calls at one time on demonetization, GST, it appears somewhere he has almost planned this through maybe before 2014. So, can you give us an insight on Prime Minister Modi's understanding of economics and how he has gone through it?
See, economics as a specialized subject of experts itself is a dead notion. In 1990, 2006, I think, when the crisis occurred. In 2009, June, the Economist magazine came out with a cover story that macroeconomics is dead, which is a fact. There is no functioning economic theory today applicable to all situations, all nations. It is now accepted by all economists. Then where is something called an economics as a subject? It requires an understanding of the society and the specific needs of the society. In the year 2005, the very G20 nations met in Beijing, and a resolution was passed that this one-size-fits-all model, which produced all these economics, is no more valid. Development has to be country-specific and culture-specific. 2005, G20 nations. In 2008, the World Bank said the same thing. We have learned the hard way that there is no one-size-fits-all model for all. Each nation will have to work out its own model. Tell me which economist in the world has ever accepted this formulation. In 2013, the United Nations, which first said everybody must have one model. You throw all your philosophies, all your culture, all your value systems. There must be one model of life for the world, and that will come from the West. The United Nations said in 2013, which was incorporated in the Millennium Development Goals for Development, that development has to be culture-based. And without cultural underpinning, there cannot be development. The whole world has changed. Economics has not changed. Modi was new to Delhi, but he was not new to administration. He had a vision of developing Gujarat, and he developed it, solved most of the carryover problems of Gujarat, and he was the theoretician. He was the policy maker. In fact, I will give you two personalized instances. We are friends. I asked him, how is it that you have been able to formulate a completely new model of governance? He said, Guru, I called all the IAS officers, 300 or 350, whatever. 3 days I only asked them to say what they are doing in their own department. And one after another, everyone stood up and said, they are doing this, they are doing this, they are doing this. I found they were only doing work among themselves. For nearly 60-70% of the work is among themselves. I ensured that there will not be any work which will be done among them. Very little work. This speeded up the delivery mechanism. Amazing speed occurred because the clog was the bureaucracy itself. Economic theories have no answer for this. So, it is the knowledge that you gather as to how to work a colonial legacy called the Indian administration through your original Indian empirical knowledge. He applied the Indian empirical knowledge to a colonial administration which we are having as the Indian administration today, and that's the reason for his success. Even in foreign policy, I think he cut across the normal diplomatic input mechanism and built a direct rapport with world leaders. For example, Abe, for instance, Trump, for instance. You take leaders, he built direct rapport with them. In fact, our media even used to criticize. Foreign media used to criticize even more. Be careful, this man hugs you. He had his own way of handling people. So he took over the world. So you cannot, a silo-based assessment of Modi will never give a comprehensive assessment of him.
Excellent, sir. Absolutely. I was walking in this a few days back. I had a morning walk with someone, and the person said that, see, I was very angry with the government after demonetization. And the person said, see, he explained his position to me. He said, I am from the Sangh, I support the RSS, I've been a BJP voter, But when demonetization happened, I was very angry with the government because I felt that they have let down their own constituency because everybody had a family member, this person told me that my mother had 2 lakh rupees, and in cash. So for very personal reasons, we got upset. But now he told me that when on the morning walk, he said that when I see that my mother is doing all her transactions on a UPI device and we have a completely cashless digital economy, then I feel that my anger was misplaced. So I think sometimes we react as people. Mr. Gurumurthy, there are people who always look at the negative story, negative side, and we have many people like that. I look at, let me be direct with you, sir. I find Mr. Raghuram Rajan baffling to me because I'll give my view, sir. I know you're on the board of RBI, you will not speak of individuals, but I find it baffling that he was very much there in the RBI when all the NPAs happened, and now he cribs about the NPAs. Regardless of that, I find that now they say, for example, I'll mention 2 individuals. Raghuram Rajan says, there's trouble ahead for India. He's finding trouble in everything. Mr. Arvind Subramaniam recently, he says that, oh yeah, good that Apple is investing in India, but we are not sure whether this will be sustainable, he says. Because there are many reasons why Apple's investment in India may be a one-odd thing, And of course, the usual suspects in the media pick that up and raise a question about cynicism. We are steamrolling ahead. And I think we should look at the positive story. And on the political side, let me tell you how people speak. I'm just talking about the cynic side. We have Rahul Gandhi, who every morning gets up and says, we must be very careful about China. China will do something big, and he says our soldiers are getting beaten at the border, which is such a wrong thing to say. Then Mr. Chidambaram says, don't worry, the economy will fall. He says it before the budget and after the budget every time. I want a very clear answer. You may not refer to the individuals, you may if you wish. How should we deal with cynicism? And how should we deal with these doomsday prophets who are around us nowadays? Mr. Gurumurthy.
See, basically these responses come from not neutral minds. So you must classify Raghuram Rajan as an opposition party man. Then you understand what he speaks is easily understandable. I don't think anybody should be responding to Rahul Gandhi because he says he is a new Rajiv Gandhi. The old Rajiv Gandhi is 8 years, 10 years, he was being projected as Prime Minister and he has been killed. That means even he feels that his past was a burden. Whether his future is a promise or not, he has to prove. That your past is a burden, you have admitted. Whether your future is going to be a promise or not, you have to prove. Then only we can consider Rahul Gandhi's opinion as something to be responded to and relevant. So far as Raghuram Rajan is concerned, I must tell you one thing. He once made an honest statement that the entire NPA is a creation of the UPA rule. But having said that,
True, sir.
How did he walk with Rahul Gandhi and what pride Rahul Gandhi in walking with a man who said NPA was created by UPA? I cannot understand that. Because they believe that the people forget so easily. A new picture will obliterate the old facts. That's not the case. None of this looks credible, actually. If Apple is coming to India, it is not because it is cheaper to make the phone in India. It is safer to make it.
Fantastic.
The entire idea of...
Fantastic.
The entire idea of cheaper supply chains has been finished.
Yes.
From cheap source to safe source is the shift in the world. So that is why economics is also changing. Because safety is long-term cheapness. So we need not have to worry about it. If India is sought after by the West, it is in its own interest. They need to develop India, they need to strengthen India in every sense of the term. Otherwise, the West is not secure. Do you mean to say otherwise they are going to tolerate the position we have taken in Ukraine?
They don't have
They
an
said,
option.
no, we understand your compulsions, you have your traditional relationships, we know about all this, we are disappointed, but do we expect a superpower like America to talk like this to us? Things have changed. Permutation combinations have changed. Balance of power has shifted. So, India is in an advantageous position, but India will not misuse that position. Fantastic. The greatest guarantee the world has about India that it will not be an immoral country.
That's true. That's true.
That guarantee our civilization gives. So I am not worried about the media or some of these people saying snide remarks here and there. Our journey will continue. That's why I said I again endorse what Ratan Tata said. We have another 25 years, very, very highly interesting period ahead. This is the kind of time that we have been hoping for.
So my next two questions related to that are on how Indian businesses, Indian corporates, you've been for decades a corporate advisor, a corporate crisis manager, everything in the past. How should we adapt to this change? And I link it to what is happening around the world. Sir, after the Cold War, America felt that the world was theirs. What you said, liberal democracy. And in fact, I think Francis Fukuyama wrote this book saying the end of history as we know it. And now even he was so sure that what had been achieved was this final state of history.
Yes, yes.
Where America and liberal democracy will rule the world for the next 1,000 years.
Hegelian perspective.
It's a Hegelian perspective. So while there was a Marxist perspective, this was the opposite perspective. And I found it interesting. I saw Francis Fukuyama, I heard him recently, disowning his own idea. He says, no, I didn't mean history in the way it was interpreted in the name of my book. I meant some other form of history. So today, when even a Fukuyama is forced to disown his arrogance of 30 years back, so we are entering a new phase of history. How should Indian companies, Indian business persons, Indian company owners, Indian startups approach their perspective to how they run their companies? And I'm telling you this, sir, because 15, 20 years back, everybody felt, globalization. Everybody read Thomas Friedman, everybody wanted to be a globalist. Thomas Friedman isn't that popular anymore. So world has changed. So my question is that everybody had this American perspective to how they want to run the business. Every Indian startup wanted to be a copycat model of a Silicon Valley startup in their lifestyle, in the food, in the way they behave, in the antics they do in their office. So everybody had this, we have to be cool perspective and have a basketball court right in the middle of their organizations. So I'm asking you from a cultural ethos perspective, what is your advice while the world is changing to how Indian corporates should run and operate their business and their business environments?
You see, the Indian corporates, I have a long association with them. I have seen them from inside, I have fought them. None of them believed in the Western model of doing business. They were only acting the Western model of doing business.
Amazing. Amazing.
They always promoted loyalty, though they will be talking about hire and fire, professionalism and all that. The closest and the most critical employees at any level, right down to the driver and peon, they will be having only loyal people. So the Indian mind never accepted the Western model of management or doing business. But of course, if you want some KPMG and others to come and look at your office, that you must have some presentation model. So my feeling is the Indian business is essentially Indian. And when India's civilizational stature goes up in the world, they will begin talking about the Indian values, Indian way of doing things. In fact, many of my friends are Marwadi businessmen. I used to think their HR model is the best in the world, because they used to own all the employees. I have seen many Marwadi top the chairman and all that, going to ordinary clerk's house if there is a problem. This made the whole organization tick to one culture. Every organization had a culture, has a culture. It is not that it is a boarding and lodging culture. So I think time has come. Just Japan did. Japan never believed in iron and fire policy. Even in their promotions, they were very sensitive that they should not promote a junior over a senior, and they must get the senior to endorse that promotion. They are also a very important industrial power. So you have to align your culture to development. You see, without aligning your culture to development at the family level, at the corporate level, at the government level, at the media level, you will never be able to become a global power on your terms. You will become a global power wearing somebody else's dress, which Japan tried. Japan is now thinking how to discard the coats and become Japanese. It's not possible. In the house, they have a different culture. In the office, they have a different culture. Because these are all strategic reformulation of a failed nation, defeated nation to come up. Every nation formulates its strategies. We have also formulated our strategies, our business, but we were not a confident people. Now we are becoming a confident society, confident business people. Our chartered accountants are becoming confident. Our lawyers are becoming confident. Our MBAs are becoming confident. So they can develop their own theories now. So my feeling is, as India rises, the Indian thoughts, Indian models, Indian way of doing things will become a brand for others to follow.
Sir, I'll ask you 2 more questions, and maybe I'll take 2 questions from the audience. My next question, which emerges from this, sir, is the concept of value versus valuation. Good businesses, in my view, should build value. Of late, people have been chasing valuation. And we have seen a colossal loss of shareholder value in the last 1 year. Some companies which suddenly went to the market on the basis of high valuations, extracted the money from the retail investor. Their individual promoters became very rich. They got interviewed everywhere. And the media also, sir, I'm so sorry, the pink media is so sold out sometimes. They made these people heroes, but now the company's valuations, sir, have come down by 50%, 60%, 70%. Even SEBI is now beginning to get concerned that what has happened, what have we done? And SEBI should do some rethinking. So this is also a cultural thing, sir, because there was so much free capital available. You know, everybody, I've seen companies, I'm not taking names, the first thing that they do when they raise capital is not build their product, they do a big advertising campaign. They get invited on business channels, and then they extract the value from the advertiser, give the money to the advertiser, they extract the value from the investor, and basically they're vamoose. So I think that there is a lack of corporate ethics there. So a question to you, sir, is, I'm concerned about the social implications as well. We see Microsoft laying off people, we see others laying off people, but I've also seen a lot of Indian companies that had taken this easy capital now suddenly start to streamline. And when they are streamlining, sir, they're not streamlining by 10%. They may say we are shaving off 10% of our employees, but the real shaving off is a lot more. It leads to unemployment. It leads to social, so there'll be a lot of people who would suddenly be laid off. So my question to you, sir, is taking off from the previous question, a lesson for Indian corporates and businesses on this issue of value versus valuation, sir. What is your reading of it?
See, actually, after globalization, when the global money began driving, you must have heard about how far the global money expansion has taken place. Bain's company report and all that. Money is generated by money. I'll just give you 3 figures. The world wealth in 2019 was estimated at $380 trillion world wealth, out of which $280 trillion is real estate, out of which $220 trillion is house property. These are all valuation. Nobody sells the house property. And nobody can buy. For example, in America, the house property valuation is $48 trillion. But who is going to buy these properties at $48 trillion? All this has gone into creating money. And the debt outstanding against it is $253 trillion. I am giving 2019 figures from the Credit Suisse Wealth Report. You up the valuation, you cut down the interest rate, the values go up, your property. This is how the subprime, the whole world has got on to the subprime model. Creating money out of appreciation in the value of the assets, which is called asset appreciation model. And monies that have been created out of it, the investors want demand. For example, you have interviewed Sridhar Vembu. Sridhar Vembu is a person who has refused to take $1 of investment from any fund. There are people who are standing in queue. His company is valued at 40,000 crores or something like that. He has refused to take. He says, once I take money, I will not be able to do any R&D work. He is plowing back all the money. His monthly profit is 300 crores. He is putting all the money in R&D. His idea is, in the next 7-8 years, he should become one of the top 5 technology companies in the world. That is the model for India. India must live by earning and saving and not by borrowing and spending. This is the model that India has to give to the world. Actually, the Western model is borrow and spend, borrow and invest, and naturally that produces a new dynamics. And this development is because the foreign funds invest money and they want you to show results. And that is how even accounting frauds have taken place in Enron and all that. So these, particularly the new technology companies, are victims of this. I think there has to be more shareholder awareness. Media has to play a role. And I don't find any great media intellectualism to alert the people, because today the media, the journalists want to drive in big cars and they want to have farmhouses. It is not possible for them to be very truthful in their writing.
I think Sridhar Vembu's example, sir. By the way, sir, I share that view on the media, sir. And let me tell you very frankly that media does not consider me to be a part of their media.
Because you have not taken money from the funds.
Correct, sir. And I also believe in the Swadeshi model, sir. As you know, sir, Republic is one media house which does not have 0.00001% foreign shareholding in this company. It's so easy for us to raise funds, but we want a Swadeshi model of media in India as well. And I can promise you, Mr. Gurumurthy, in our lifetimes, we will take this Swadeshi model to a global level also.
100%.
Sir, I think Sridhar Vembu's model is marvelous, but it also comes from his strong cultural confidence.
Without cultural underpinning.
I really want to meet him one day. The person lives in his village, he drives a cycle, and he's not doing anything for show. He thinks big, and my grandfather, by the way, sir, who was a leading communist and Marxist leader of his time, used to tell me that Arnab believe in simple living and high thinking. And I think today's Sridhar Vembu is...
Those
Marxists. I'm talking about 50s, 60s. Sridhar Vembu is a perfect example of someone who is simple living and high thinking. And by the way, he considers Mr. Gurumurthy as his mentor. So I think we all have you as our guiding light. Mr. Gurumurthy, my last question, and we'll take 2 questions from the audience after that. So you spoke about settling the past. It was a very interesting phrase which you used. Article 370, settling the past. Don't keep Kashmir on the back burner. Or on what you call, slow burner. Resolving the Ram Temple issue. Don't keep it on the slow burner. Don't keep poverty on the slow burner. Don't build up this whole issue of caste-based reservations as an issue that you can pick up at any point of time to provoke people and ignite fires. Just before you today, we saw a presentation by Dr. Shamika Ravi where she showed that there were far more riots 10 years back or 15 years back than there are now. You know, it's remarkable when we say that. And how many of those riots were caste-based riots? Now, sir, my last question is, broader. Settling the past is good, but there are people who want to muddy the present. You see, and what you call anarchists. And we have a genuine issue. See, we have limitations of being a democracy. When we have roads being stopped, when we have protests that are contemptuous of the Supreme Court as well, we are somewhere held back because of the fact that we have to handle the complexity of a democracy. My question to you is broader, sir. People say we are exactly poised where China was 20 years back. But China seized the opportunities and could push forth ahead, and one of the reasons they could is because they were not a democracy. Will we be able to do that within the complexity of running a peaceful, multi-party democracy? Is it possible to do that?
See, I think the idea of keeping development upfront, which Narendra Modi has done for the last 10, 15 years, from Gujarat days, I believe that many people are now sold on the idea of development. The idea of development moderates this kind of the credibility that these people have, the anarchists, because of the support they get and all that. I think the more the idea of development takes root, then the idea of agitations will go back. The credibility of the agitations supported by all these liberals and left and media, that will also go back. I think as compared to the position in 2014-15, things are much better now. I will only because it's not very easy to do this U-turn. I think with all the limitations of a highly split polity, with a society which is so diverse, if you keep India on the one hand and the rest of the world on the other, you have more diversity here than the rest of the world put together. I mean, we are still clicking because there is a common ambition which has been aroused in India in the last 10 years of India as the agenda. I think this is now picking up. Just one statement which Kennedy made, man on the moon, that completely lifted America. So India as a global power, that 21st century is India's century. I think this will hugely moderate these vociferous and anarchist tendencies. Because certain amount of emotional building is needed, and that is happening in my view. Because it is a 50-year overview I am giving what state India was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and what it is today. I am able to see the difference. There is a paradigm shift.
Absolutely. Would we have any interest in questions from the audience? Okay. You have a question, sir? We'll take 2 questions for Mr. Gurumurthy. Yes, please, sir.
Sir, thank. At the age of 45, I understood that scrapping a vehicle at 8 years age of that vehicle is not good for the economy and for the environment. So many questions we understood. 84% of the protein comes from crop. Sir, at the age of 44, I am a chartered accountant. Why these things doesn't come in the education policy? Why a child doesn't learn it? I am well learned into economics, but this never has been the part of my education. Today, when I see at the colleges, schools, I'm running colleges, going to the schools, 40 to 50% kids, they are getting addicted to kind of vape, that is e-cigarette, and another things, or the digital media. Yes, probably as you said, our DNA is very well cultural. Last 10 years taught me how gracious was our culture. The Indian heritage is really fantastic, and I'm proud of that. But that is all my study of last 10 years and some great lectures like you people have arranged. Never my studies and my books has taught me all these things. Why and what we are supposed to do so that my every kid, every person will learn these things. Probably this all knowledge and great thoughts, they remain only to well-studied people like us, and even on TV and media, people rarely see these things. They are much interested into entertainment. Please change the education and everybody should be enlightened.
Shall I tell you something? It is this very group which would prevent any change in the education system. They will say it's all saffron. Once you begin talking about India, they will say it is saffron. It is this class, this educated class, this English educated group, and who wanted good name from others. You know, one of the greatest weaknesses of our people is they want certificate from enemies. They don't want certificate from anyone else. Our enemy must say you are a good person. Then you are a good person. See, this kind of weaknesses as a civilization, we are overcoming. I tell you, the change that has taken place after 1990s, with of course some ups and downs. I didn't believe it would take place in my lifetime. I'm telling you. From 1970, I have been working. In emergency, I was underground. And afterwards, I was arrested and a huge political battle with Rajiv Gandhi and all. But I never thought the kind of change which I have seen later, I would see in my lifetime. So you got to see some 20, 30 years time span as to what is the change. You cannot see this change every year or every 2 years. You have to wait. But the change is taking place.
Absolutely. Wonderful, sir. See, whenever you are answering, I think that, have you noticed one thing, Mr. Gurumurthy, that the entire audience has been silent and spellbound listening to you for 1 hour? I'm glad you're not a TV anchor, sir. You would have taken my job many times over. But your knowledge is profound and you're providing a multidisciplinary perspective. Geostrategy, economics, corporate, history, political science, agriculture, and you put together this multidisciplinary perspective, which is, it should lead to an awakening. It will. These kind of conversations, sir, we should all put it viral on social media. We have one more question for you, sir, from the here. Please go ahead.
So first and foremost, it's been an absolute honor and a privilege to be in the same room listening to you.
Thank you.
And Arnab said it best, we never thought that a food style and a lifestyle could impact a world economy. And you exhibited it and made us understand it so very well. Just 2 points, sir. As the economy and the worldview has changed, earlier it used to be the industrial revolution which actually made everything homogeneous, made everything manufactured at scale and reach everywhere globally. Now it is being changed and challenged by individualism, where everything is being, the power of a consumer, the power of a thinker, the power of a social media is making the change. Similarly, in India, the capital allocation in terms of the top 1% and the bottom 99% has also changed. What are your views on that? How does the small and medium scale enterprise in India actually grow big, grow global, and also make an impact? Thank you so much.
Actually, it is globalization which gave impetus to the idea of huge manufacture. You know, if you take Fortune 500 companies in the year 1960, they employed 18% of the American population in 1960. In 1980, it came down to 8%. It is far less now. It is the small and medium enterprises which make the big enterprises function. For example, take any of the Toyota or whichever company it is. 30, 40,000 MSMEs constitute one Toyota. So the way the small and medium enterprises will function in relation to a brand is what will decide the manufacturing part. For example, Hindustan Lever, it's not manufacturing itself. It's getting its manufactured from 1,000 people. So the small and medium relationship will be of the Japanese model. It is the American automobile industry copied the Japanese model actually. It is the Japanese which developed the alignment between small and medium enterprises and large companies. That is happening in India, in the manufacturing sector. And because India was quite late because of the political difficulties we had. Just to give you a small example, the 4 gorgeous dam which China built, it built in 11 years. Our Narmada dam took 60 years. It is because of the political problems, and no prime minister knew whether he would last for 3 months later. That kind of situations. That has been largely overcome because the nation feels that we need a government. Today, the biggest advantage of this government is that it has been able to rule and rule well, and it has been able to deliver certain things. And even if they go for another government, that government has to be like this government is the message that has been delivered to the most important classes of India who have very heavy influence in the society. So my feeling is that we are all in the transitional stages. This alignment will keep on taking place, and as the world moves away from globalization, everybody has declared globalization as dead. There will be more triadization, there will be more regional pacts, there will be more bilateral arrangements which will take over the world, and this one money concept will disappear. And I have a feeling the picture that we have today will be very different from the picture that will emerge in the next 10 years. It's not possible to do it only through policy mechanism because a whole host of things shape up the developments. All that I can say is the days of miniaturization of production, miniaturization of enterprises, miniaturization of delivery mechanism has come. Yesterday, a small boy, he met me, he is doing some cloud work. I asked him, he came to deliver his calendar to me, young boy. He had a startup and he said there are 2 companies, one is making loss, another making profit. I said, what is the profit you are making? He said, my turnover is 1 crore. What is the profit you are making? He said 50 lakhs.
Yeah, amazing.
You don't know, the small enterprises are not small.
Yeah.
They conceal something big. Things are changing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I must thank you at this point. I'm profoundly aware of the fact that, Mr. Gurumurthy, you have not had breakfast. You need to have lunch and then catch your flight. But that is his commitment to this event, And I'm so happy you came to this.
I didn't want to miss it.
No, it's one thing that you didn't want to miss it, but the commitment you have shown to giving your message to all of us, and as people in your physical presence will feel more inspired. So I'm personally grateful to you.
Thank you so much.
And we are all grateful to you, sir.
Thank you.
Big round of applause for Mr. Gurumurthy.
Thank you so much, Gurumurthy sir. Thank you, Arnab, for that very interesting conversation. Today, it has become clearer than ever that India has the resources, it has the potential and the roadmap to forge a path to become an economic superpower. The conversations today have truly revitalized our belief in the growing India story. And now I invite Arnab Goswami on stage for the closing address.
Well, after what Mr. Gurumurthy has said, I think there doesn't need to be a closing, but I'd like to say that it has been a total delight to have the Republic Dialogues here in Pune today. Every moment was captivating, and if there are about 5 or 6 things from this thought leadership series, I just summarize my thoughts to the following. One is that we've entered an era of transformation. We had an engaging session with Dr. Shamika Ravi, who proved that with data that India's time has come. And we are becoming a country where even a minuscule change and transformation in every corner of the country is going to transform the full picture. Secondly, the conversation with the top economists showed us how we are a resilient economy, the phrase that was used by the professor here today. It was delightful to have Mr. Bagla from Davos today, which is just from the right of the heart of the world economy conversation on how the world is perceiving India, how our time has come. And Mr. Gurumurthy said our time has come, but truly, ladies and gentlemen, the cynics may churn out a very pessimistic view on a daily basis, but the facts, the data, the geopolitical reality proves that India is right here to lead the global order. And as Mr. Gurumurthy also said, the journey has just begun, and it gives me great pride because Indian businesses are making waves, the Indian way. We are rooted in India. We are proud of India. We're philosophically and culturally aligned to India. It's about Bharatiyata, and our journey has just begun. So I think a lot of food for thought, and I think I can only say big thank you to everyone for allowing us to host it in this wonderful city. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for making the time to be a part of this event in Pune. And Republic Media Network thanks you all for your presence here. Also, I'd request you all to make your way out for lunch. And a big thank you once again.
A news network powered by India's love. A news network fueled by a mission. A pledge to put nation first, people first, India first. A network that's unafraid in its pursuit. A network that is undeterred in its quest for accountability.
Mr. Malia, you try to besmirch everyone. You're a cheat, you're an unaware, you're a fugitive, and don't try and pretend, Mr. Malia, that you cannot hear me.
A network that won't back down from asking your questions.
Rahul ji, any response to those 5 MPs who choose not to be part of this?
Whatever I have to say, I said it. मैं आपको सबूत दिखाना चाहता हूँ. आप इधर आ जाइए. हम देख लिया आपकी बात. आप इधर आइए.
A network that expanded to serve Rashtra ke naam.
नमस्कार, मैं हूँ अर्नब गोस्वामी.